I'll call this meeting to order at 8:34 a.m. on, welcome to September the 4th, or the 5th? It's the 4th.
The 4th.
Okay, we're good on the 4th. All right. With that, we will start by having our chaplain prayer. If you will please come forward, Marcella.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let's pray. Dear God, thank you that you promised us that where two or three are gathered in your name, there you are in the midst, Lord. We welcome you among us today and celebrate the gift of life that you have lavished upon each of us. We ask that you would open our ears so that we may hear your voice. Open our minds so that we may receive your eternal wisdom. Open our spirits so that we may know your leading and guidance. And open our hearts so that we may receive your wonderful love. Father, we pray that you protect all our cities from active shooters. We pray for those that have been affected by this horrible act. Bring peace and comfort to the surviving families and friends. Lord, we ask you to send rain to San Angelo without the devastating storm, and we be mindful to give you the praise. We ask all this in the glorious name of Jesus. Amen.
May I ask us all to bow our heads and have a moment of silence in honor of the Odessa shootings and all that went on this weekend. Thank you very much. With that, we also want to acknowledge many of us have, all of you, I think, have your yellow ribbon on this morning, and that is also in honor of hashtag Odessa Strong. We know that out here in West Texas, we are one, and that we are stronger together than we are separate. And so whether it's hashtag Odessa Strong or whether it's hashtag West Texas Strong, we all unite in support of the families and the friends whose lives have forever been changed. So whatever we can do as a community to reach out and support those folks, we ask that you do so. With that, let's have some pledges. Come forward. We've got today our Santa Rita Elementary 4th grader, Juliana Johnson, and our 3rd grader, London Johnson. We're just missing Paris Johnson today, aren't we? Yes. Come on up here. We're going to turn and do this flag first. So let's put our hand over our heart.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Today we have 2 proclamations and recognitions, and so the first one will be the proclamation of September 2019 as Hunger Action Month. Do I have anyone here? Please come forward. Millions of Americans need supplemental nutritional assistance at some time each month, including 1 in every 6 Texans. The Concho Valley Regional Food Bank, a member of Feeding America and Feeding Texas, highlights its year-long effort to feed the hungry by observing September 2019 as Hunger Action Month. With the emphasis on action during this month, We can help end hunger, one helping at a time. The Concho Valley Regional Food Bank solicits and distributes surplus food to over 90 charitable food programs in San Angelo and the Concho Valley. The Concho Valley Regional Food Bank has distributed over 42 million pounds of food to its agencies since its inauguration in 1983 and in celebration of its 36th anniversary. The Concho Valley Regional Food Bank distributes over 2 million pounds of food annually to local nonprofit agencies which are committed to provide aid to the needy of our area. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim September 2019 as Hunger Action Month in recognition of the contributions of the Concho Valley Regional Food Bank in the fight to feed the hungry of San Angelo and the Concho Valley.
Mayor, we appreciate the support of the city and the support of our mission. And the Concho Valley Regional Food Bank is a part of the network of food banks across the country of Feeding America. And this year's theme, which is one helping at a time, and we encourage all of our citizens to help us in any way we can to further our mission, be that through monetary contribution, volunteer hours, or indeed food donations. Again, thank you so much for your support.
We will now have a recognition of the 7th Annual San Angelo Cowboy Gathering Festival, and I know that there's some folks in the audience. If you'll please come forward, or Terry, you're in the audience. The San Angelo Cowboy Gathering had its beginning in 2012 and has progressed in size from a few hundred attendees to over 1,100 guests in 2019 and continues to bring guests from all over the USA and overseas each year. The San Angelo Cowboy Gathering presents the 7th annual festival to celebrate traditional country music and Western swing, all to benefit a local nonprofit in San Angelo each year. Our monetary support in the last 6 years has awarded over $104,000 to local nonprofits. The festival on September 13th and 14th, 2019, features over 16 artists and bands, many being Grammy Award winners, and features a cowboy church service, vendors, and concessions. The festival has brought international, state, and local awards and recognitions to San Angelo and the music scene over the past 6 years. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby recognize and applaud the 7th Annual Cowboy Gathering Festival for its achievement and positive determination to make a difference in our community.
Yes, we just want to say thank you to the community, the mayor and the council and everyone that supports us each and every year. We do have another sold-out event with over 1,100 folks coming in 2 weeks' time, and so we're excited. We're very blessed that we can support other nonprofits in this community because we know what great work they do, and we want to be a part of each and every one. So we hope that you'll come out and see us. Thank you so much for your support.
With that, we will now go into public comment. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. So again, state your name and your address and your SMD area. And each citizen may speak to one item only. Thank you. Do I have any public comment?
Well, I can't cover it in 3 minutes, but that's okay. I came from another meeting.
Could you
Oh, my name
explain
is
your
Don
name,
Chavez.
please? Yes, and your
I've been a
district,
business owner here
please.
for 15 years, and I don't think I'll make 16. And here's why. I come from a different meeting the last month and even last year from Tom Green County Commissioners, where they're increasing taxes. It went from 3.5% to 8%, and they decreased it to 7.99 whoopee. And then I come to this meeting last week, and guess what? We need a tax increase because we're broke. I don't believe that. Excuse me. But, it's just a continuation.
Sir, we'll be talking about the budget later, and your comments would probably be more suited there.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought it was all for public input, and that was because I got to go back to work, unfortunately, to pay for taxes.
Finish your comment, and we will
Okay.
take that into consideration as we go through the budget.
I appreciate it, thanks. I was not aware that the budget was going to be put off to a later
Okay.
date or later time. But anyway, the other thing I was going to talk about is these one-way traffic signals that we got at Avenue N, Jackson. You got three-way stops, northeast and west. So one lane can go in one direction. Same thing over here at Knickerbocker, my favorite place. It's the same issue, and I've called the city. They said, well, we want to prevent accidents. You can't take common sense away from the people. And that's what we're trying to do. But the other issue, what time is going to be the comment on taxation?
Well, it's on the regular agenda, and so it'll probably be within an hour.
I'll stay here. Thank
Okay,
you.
sir, thank you very much. Is there any further public comment?
Mayor Shane Kelton, Director of Operations. Just a follow-up from last week, or the last council meeting when we discussed in the budget, when we were going over the potholes and all the issues we're having. Of course, we keep getting inundated, and I know y'all do as well too, on the pothole issues that we have out there. And just want to let everybody know that my guys we continue to work on those just as hard and fast as we can. And I keep getting, comments about, well, we just need to put more money into it. We need to put more money into it. And that's not always just putting more money into it's not always the answer. It's a larger, more sustained problem than that. And so, and a lot of it, is due to personnel. And my personnel, we're spread pretty thin, and we're working as fast as we can. So these are, a lot of it is as much personnel as it is funding. And so just wanted to let everybody know and reiterate that we're working on them just as hard and fast as we can go. Their crews are out there every day, repairing and patching potholes. And of course, every day we're getting more of them, unfortunately. So, but again, and citizens do need to hopefully keep calling in and letting us know where they are. Again, when we have so many miles of street and so few employees, that we're actually actively working on those. We're not out actively searching for all of them. So please contact us. Our main number at the Street and Bridge Division is 325-657-4231. Or they can go on the city's website at cosatx.us, go to the Street and Bridge Division, and they can actually, there's an email that will go directly to report a pothole that goes directly to our Street and Bridge Superintendent and their staff, so that they can be reported and they can get work orders on them. But again, just kind of wanted to follow up on that, because we have been getting a lot of inundation and a lot of comments about, well, we just need to throw more money at it. And again, right now, it's not necessarily more money is going to help me right now.
You have the money to do the work. You don't have the personnel to do the work.
It's as much personnel as it is anything on the pothole repair at this point.
So do you want a human resource call out right now? If somebody would like to come help fill one of those jobs that you have open, who should they contact?
That's it. If you need a job and you want to help fill potholes, we can go down to the human resources on second floor of City Hall, and we will be more than happy to review your application. So yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane.
Do we have further public comment?
Ryan Groves, the city's public information office. I'm excited that our office is now fully staffed, and I'd like to introduce Lorelei Day. She's our communications coordinator, so she'll be the other employee in our office.
Welcome.
Hello.
So today's your first day? Welcome aboard. Glad to have you. We'll keep you busy.
Steve Hampton, District 6. I would like to hear more about the consent agenda G and H.
Further public comment? With no further public comment, we will close this section of the agenda, and we will move into the consent agenda. Do I have any items that council would like to pull? I'm going to start with Tommy.
No, ma'am.
Tom?
No, ma'am.
Gary?
Aye.
Item I is being pulled. Lucy?
F.
F is being pulled. Lane?
No, ma'am.
And Billy?
Yes, Mayor. Item C, item E, item G, and item H.
I got the C, the E, and what else, Billy?
G and H.
The G and H, yes, okay. With that, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items? Okay, let me just
Second.
clarify real quick. I've got a motion by Lane, a second by Lucy, and the consent agenda that we are approving at this point is items A, items B, item D, item J, item K, item L, item M, N, and O. Is that correct? Okay, with that, I have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on that motion or that second and those agenda items? With none, we will take a vote. All in favor of approving those consent agenda items, please say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, consent agenda passes 7-0. We will start by discussing item C. Consider awarding CFM-01-19 electrical maintenance and repair service to MC Electric and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Ron, welcome.
Ron, good morning. And we did talk about this a little bit yesterday, but I was looking in the report to council. It says that bids were selected from licensed electrical contractors, and that some of the contractors responded to the bid. Then when I look at the bid tabulation, I only see one contractor. So did we have other bidders?
We did not. We only have received one bid at the time of the opening. We were advertised, purchasing does that through the newspaper and through the website, our website. And there were email addresses for many of the contractors that were contacted through an email by purchasing. And
I know that across the city right now, Billy, there have been many projects that have put out for bid for electrical work. And in most cases, if you get one, you're lucky right now. They're all very tied up. And so we have a shortage of electricians right now in this city, so it has become an issue. Okay?
Thank you, Ron. And then I had item E as well.
We go ahead and take a motion.
You want to go ahead and act on that one? So Billy, would you
I-
like to make a motion
I
on
will
that?
make a motion that we approve item C.
All right, and a second by Lane. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving item C, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. Now, Billy, we will go into item E, which is consider approving a contract with King Consultants, DBA Construction Consulting 3, Inc., through TIPS number 181101 in the amount of $192,661.20, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents for the asbestos abatement, demolition, and site restoration at Lot 1, Block 24, Mills Paul Addition, also known as 711, 713, 715, 717, and 721 South Oak Street. Ron, you are on again, and Billy, do you have questions?
Yes, Ron, could you tell me a little bit more about this project? And also in the report to council, it said that funding is secured and available, and I'd like to know where that funding would be coming from.
Okay. First, the funding is in the general fund, as I corrected you just this morning. I made a mistake. And it was acquired from, I think about 2014, we found some money that we decided to put toward two projects that dealt with demolition of buildings. One was the building where 618 parking lot is now, Station 618 Senior Center, and the church that was built by the Conservancy. And the second one is this location. And we purchased the property, the city did many years ago, I think 2008. And it's been condemned recently by the construction board with a recommendation from the fire department and dangerous buildings. And we've gone forward with this negotiated contract because it has to be the abatement, because of the deterioration of the building, can't be abated like a typical building where you have containment areas and you clean it up and then you tear the building down. You have to actually tear the building down and take all the debris as asbestos, and that's required.
Because it has been determined that there is asbestos
Yes,
present?
there was a survey done prior to it being in this condition.
Okay.
So we have that, and so we're asking you to move forward on this contract.
Thanks, Ron.
Any other questions for Ron on this item? All right, Billy, would you like to make a motion then to approve this item E?
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
A second by Lucy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, it passes 7-0. We will move to item F. Consider ratifying a resolution by COSA DC authorizing the use of sales and use tax funds in an amount not to exceed $638,861 for affordable housing assistance program to assist low-income qualifying homeowners in rehabilitation of residential structures damaged citywide by the ET tornado occurring on May 18th, 2019. Bob? Question, I
Can I ask
forget
some
who
questions?
pulled this one.
Lucy did.
Lucy, okay.
Sir. Bob, I just wanted you to explain to the public and to our viewers about this as far as, how to go about it and what it's all about.
Sure. The COSA DC Board asked staff to do an assessment of the damage by the storm over in Bradford area and to come back with a proposal. We did. We assessed about 3 units that have to be reconstructed and about 14 major rehabs, so we came up with that $600,000 figure. It is a citywide program, but we have people in line ready for action. So once this is approved, we'll be able to go in there and try to meet some of the requirements, some of the needs they have in those areas to kind of eliminate the slum and blight conditions that are being developed over there because of the storm. Right now, like I said, we have a list already. We've made initial contact. Once we go through all that, we don't know exactly how much it's going to cost. Anything left over, we'll be able to go outside that Bradford area.
Do you have people already that have applied for this, you said?
We have folks on the list,
On the
an
list.
assessment list, yes, ma'am. Not officially applied because we're not-
Right, 'cause
don't
we
have the
haven't
program
approved it yet.
As soon as you approve it, we'll be able to officially get them on the list.
And these dollars are dollars that were approved when we passed the half-cent sales tax,
That is correct.
that
It's
there
it's
would be monies available for affordable housing. Is that correct?
That is good. It's part of the affordable housing program, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mayor,
Yes, Billy?
Bob, did I understand you, are residents outside of the storm damaged area eligible for the program as well? I mean,
they
they can
are.
get their name on the list once it's approved?
Yes, they are. But again, we're trying to focus on the Bradford area because that's what the DC Board wanted us to do. So we did the assessment there. I know that other areas have been damaged that goes outside the Bradford area. We do have, by the way, another program that's citywide that's helping out. That's the roof replacement program. And we had a lot of roof damage. So we have that program undergoing right now. Your answer is yes, they are eligible.
I have another question, and you may or may not be able to answer this, but I noticed in some of the background material that Matt Lewis from the San Angelo Area Foundation had approached COSA DC, about, securing funding to do this. And I guess my question is, did the San Angelo Area Foundation match this amount, or did they put something in the pot as well so that we have more than the 638,000, or is that the total?
That is correct. They do have additional funds. They have been accumulating some funding to meet the requirements for those who don't meet our requirements. Because again, for us, you have to be income eligible. That's always the key for our programs.
Okay.
So there are folks there who are, in fact, one gentleman is $400 over. And if it's $1 over, we can't help you.
Okay.
So those people will be able to be assisted, those homeowners will be assisted through the Area Foundation funds, if possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there further questions for Bob on this issue? No further questions on this issue. Who would like to make a motion to approve item F?
I move to approve as presented.
Is there a second? A second by Tommy. Any public comment?
Steve Hampton, one question. How much is going to be given to the Bradford area and as opposed to the others?
Bob, would you like to address that issue?
Again, the 600,000 is, again, we're starting with Bradford, so we're not quite sure. We expect to be roughly about 600,000. There'll be about another 40,000 available for outside the area. If our numbers are correct, unless we can get some cheap labor and some good contracts, we're going to probably spend most of that in the Bradford area. So there'll be some left, but probably not much. But again, we have other funding for like roof programs that can help. So.
All right, so Steve, does that answer your question? Thank you. Any further comment before we take a vote? With no further comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0. We will go into item G, which is consider a charity care policy. Tina, or Brian, you're on.
Morning, Mayor, Council,
Morning.
Brian Dunn, Fire Chief. So what this entails is for the last 3 years, you've heard about the Medicaid supplemental program that we get reimbursed from the state. Well, they're changing the way they do their configurations to refund that money. And to be able to be eligible for the program starting October 1, 2019, we have to have a charity care policy in place. So what this does, it's a policy that so we can continue to participate in the state program. And some of the main things for it is that it takes into consideration is, are the people insured and their ability to pay? Those are two of the prime factors when you're looking at that charity care policy. So I'm assuming it was in your background.
It might be, but this is a public meeting, so we just want to make sure anybody who has questions about it has an opportunity.
It's a very short policy, but to participate in the program, the consultant has sent us this policy. It's one they've devised for many of the departments that are participating in the program. So it's a fairly generic policy.
Okay, Billy?
I was just going to say thank you, Brian. Certainly the background information was very thorough, but just for the larger audience, I wanted people who may not read the background information to, have a picture of what that is, because we do get a pretty substantial amount of reimbursement, through this program.
It's been in excess of $500,000 these years, and with this new type of configuration they're doing, we expect ours to remain at least neutral and maybe go up more. So because of the demographics that we serve.
Okay, thank you, Billy.
You can thank Tina for the good information you got, because she's the one that sent that to you.
Thank you, Tina.
Tina, thank you. We appreciate it. All right, Mayor, I make a motion to approve item G.
Okay, there's a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second by Lucy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0. We will move on to item H, consider approving updates to the 2019 Water Conservation Plan as requested from Texas Water Development Board. And Allison, you're on, dear.
Good morning. This plan was approved and adopted back in May, but we sent those both, or the plan off to TCEQ and Texas Water Development Board. And Texas Water Development Board requested a few clarifications or minor changes be made. Those are in the background memo, but I'll be happy to answer specific questions about.
You want to just highlight those?
Okay. Some of them were to match the consumption class so that it matched the Texas Water Development Board that we fill out. That's Appendix A, which is called the utility profile. We had used our groupings, basically commercial, institutional, industrial, those type of things in the front part of the conservation plan, and they wanted us to match those numbers in the back. So it's just basically the groupings of our customer class.
Paperwork.
Yes. The targets and goals, one of our numbers in the 2010 was from the 2009 plan, and they wanted us to put the actual consumption or GPCD, gallons per capita per day, in that number rather than the goal of what was established in 2009. The other one was, while we were adopting this water conservation plan, our water loss report was under review at that point. And once we submitted our conservation plan, our water loss audit was approved at the same time. So they wanted us to go back and put in that actual number. And then the last one was that our goal is higher than what we're actually seeing our customers use, and they wanted an explanation for that. And we told them that we wanted to keep our goal of reducing the 1.2% annually since 2000, because if we were to receive any sort of business growth or population growth, those type of things, we have room to basically still meet our goals.
So a lot of just clarification of numbers, but no real challenges to the overall
No,
program.
the core
and
of the plan is
concept.
still the same from what
Yes.
y'all approved back in May.
Okay.
And no changes to watering restrictions, those type of things. It was more just the background data and what we see our city using and producing.
Okay.
Well, thanks for that summarization of that. I have to confess, I did not read all 102 pages of this again.
Well, I did. So.
Did you, Mayor? Okay. I did not, but thank you. And I also want to thank you. I happened to be in the annex, City Hall annex, paying a bill, and the water conservation giveaway of the shower heads and the conservation package. It was a pretty active table over there. I have to say I availed myself of it, so thank you so much for putting that together and bringing that plan forward.
And we still have, we have 3,000 kits total. I can tell you that we did not give 3,000 away yesterday at the annex. So we're going to plan another, I guess a day of giveaways for those conservation kits. And then after that, we'll see how our supplies look. And then from there, we'll see how we get those dispersed. But we're still working on getting those out to our customers.
Thank you very much.
I make a motion to approve this item.
With a motion to approve, do I have a second?
Second.
And a second by Harry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, item H passes 7-0. We'll move on to item I, which is the second reading and public hearing of an ordinance amending Chapter 2, Administration and Personnel, Article 2.07, Boards, Committees, and Commissions. Harry, did you pull this one?
I did.
Would you like to talk?
I was probably one of three that was going to do this anyway, but
It's okay.
from my perspective, Teresa, do we have a policy that when we have a unanimous vote on an item on first reading, we put it on the consent agenda?
We don't have an official adopted policy, but it is our practice that we do that if there is an unanimous vote on the first reading, that we put it on second reading. That doesn't happen all the time, but that is our practice.
That means that if we don't have a unanimous vote, it really should probably go on the regular agenda?
That is typically what happens, yes.
Okay. That answers my question.
Do I have any other questions?
Well, Mayor, I do, and I thank Teresa for sending us a list of the different category of boards, with one being an advisory board, and there were about 5 or 6 different boards that were listed as advisory. So when I look through the duties of the different advisory boards, different boards have different duties, but one of the things that was pretty clear that it seems that it was kind of up to the boards how they wanted to meet, or how it was laid out in the beginning, what I read. And so some boards were required to meet, others, it said they would meet whenever they felt it was necessary. So I guess my question is, if one board feels that they need to meet every month, why would we restrict them to not meeting every month? Or if we're going to limit one board, why don't we limit all the boards and say all the boards meet, quarterly? So I think it depends on the board and the direction they want to go in.
Any comments?
Julia, you're on.
Councilmember DeWitt, what we looked at, the 5 boards that you're referring to were the Civic Events Advisory Board, Fort Concho, Parks and Recreation, Public Art Commission, and then Water Advisory Board. In the past, the Water Advisory Board had been changed to meet as directed by council, and then the Public Art Commission, they meet only when needed. The other 3 are currently meeting monthly. What we found is that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, their scope is quite lengthy. They have 7 major tasks that they're responsible for, as opposed to Civic Events Advisory Board, which just has the 3 items. So we kind of were just trying to look and see what made sense. And that's what we came up with after talking to staff. They work on policies, they review the actual facilities that Civic Events manages. And so we felt, if anything, maybe 3 meetings were necessary, but we threw in a 4th just to make it quarterly. So that's how we came up with the meeting times.
Okay. So it seems that the civic events, they have, what is it, 5 or 6 or 7 facilities that they're responsible for overseeing the maintenance, the restoration, different projects. So
They don't oversee those projects, Billy.
well, I mean,
Our
they don't
staff
oversee the
oversees them.
projects, but they have to assess the facilities.
No, our staff assesses the facilities. They might prioritize what those assessments are in their minds, but I think Ron Lewis and Dan, you want to clarify that?
Yeah, we do have staff, of course, that knows the inner workings of all our facilities, that are very well equipped, of course, to make the recommendations to City Council so that we can prioritize those items. This board specifically, as Julia mentioned a while ago, one of the main responsibilities is policies. And really in reviewing the 4 meetings that could be had per year, we felt that more than sufficed to address policy, maybe some fees that we'd be looking at in some of our facilities. But other than that, we really felt that they could do that. At last meeting that we had, we talked about, okay, if they want to meet more, if they want to tour facilities, they can do a subcommittee meetings. They're not restricted from that whatsoever. But on our end, as we mentioned last time, my biggest concern is staff timing. How much time staff has in preparing information for all these multiple meetings that we do have. It takes a lot of staff time, not just one individual, sometimes as many as 5 individuals. So I want to make sure that we're being as efficient as possible in all that we do. So that's one of the main reasons, and also being respectful of the board members' time as well. You may have 2 board members that want to have meetings every single month, but you may have other board members that are wondering why. We meet, and all that's going on in these meetings is just information that's being provided to us. So again, on our end, staff, we really felt that 4 meetings would suffice, and if they wanted other meetings, they could have those subcommittees as well.
And what are the requirements on those subcommittee meetings?
They can call it, as far as those board members can call those subcommittee meetings. You'd have membership, as far as quorum, you'd have 3 or less, is that correct, Teresa? That would meet to review if in fact, they want to do walkthroughs of facilities. They could very easily do that as well. But again, on our main issue is just making sure that we're very efficient with the timing.
So, when you look at the duties of the different boards, and Julia was sharing with me, some of those have been changed, and I guess I don't have an updated book, but who establishes the duties for those boards? Is it this council? Or?
Yeah, it is this council. I know that at times those boards have reviewed those the policies that are established, bylaws and what have you, but it is the city council that ultimately passes those bylaws. And right now, really, with our bylaws, we're trying to make sure that we have similarities across the spectrum of all the different boards that we have. As a matter of fact, that was an item that was addressed this past year, is to ensure that we don't have one board that has bylaws that are totally different from the other boards. So there's similar requirements, similar bylaws. So those are some of the things that we're actually working through. And some of the board bylaws that still come before the city council for y'all's approval.
Right, but I wasn't necessarily talking about the bylaws, but the actual duties, because maybe the way we have the boards grouped is not appropriate. Maybe, an advisory board is something that would not quite be on the same level as, say, a Fort Concho Museum board, because as I looked at that, the list of duties was shorter, but it sounds like the Civic Events Board does some of the things that are not listed there that are listed in the Fort Concho Museum Board. And, it just seemed to be so many inconsistencies that was difficult for me to get my arm around whether I thought this way or whether I thought the other way, because there was no consistency. And maybe there can't be. And maybe I just need to accept that. But I guess my mind is so literal, it's just kind of linear. And it just looks like differences are being made that I just question.
Billy's kind of touching on the question I had. Julie, can you do a brief comparison between what you said Parks and Rec and what the civic events duties are, so we can kind of see a comparison real quick?
So for the Civic Events Advisory Board, they advise the city council on matters of policy to the city manager and/or his representative as to administrative matters in regard to operation of the Convention Center, Foster Communications Coliseum, Bill Ayler Sr. Memorial River Stage, Farmers Market, City of San Angelo Indoor Arena, Pecan Creek Park Pavilion, and El Paseo de Santa Angela. And then it says the board may enact rules and regulations regarding the operation of the above-named facilities, which shall take review after review by the city council. However, the city council may take action to enact different rules and regulations at any time. And then as far as the, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, the duties are to serve as an advisory board to the city council in matters of oversight, policy, and administration relating to city parks, recreation programs, and facilities, with the exception of the Santa Fe parks, for which the Parks Commission shall continue to act. Responsibility of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board include communicating with and making recommendations to the city manager and Parks and Recreation Director regarding parks, recreation programs, and senior service programs. Make recommendations to the city manager regarding parks, recreation programs, and senior services programs. Make recommendations to the city manager regarding parks and recreation system. Make recommendations to the city manager, parks and rec director, and city council regarding maintenance of parks and park improvements. Make recommendations to the city manager, parks and recreation director, and city council regarding maintenance of recreation and senior facilities. Make recommendations to the city manager, parks and recreation director, and city council regarding acquisition of physical improvements and equipment for parks, recreation, and senior service programs. Make recommendations to the city manager, parks and recreation director, and city council regarding rules or regulations for parks, recreation, and senior services programs.
So it kind of sounds like their advisory board is doing the maintenance oversight, looking at what needs to improve, but civic events, it's more of the staff that's doing that. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, you're correct, Lane.
So why would our staff not be doing that in the parks and take that away from Parks and Rec? I'm not saying that's what needs to happen, but if we have that board, then why is that not a qualification for that board to
City council can make those changes, Lane, if that's the way that we want to go as far as the advice that we do receive from those different groups.
Well, that would take away from staff time if we have volunteers that are on this board in the first place and they're willing to go around and look at the facilities and make those recommendations, then that will take away from our employees having to go through and do that.
Julia, let me ask you a question, because we're not talking about all boards right now, we're talking about specific board. Is this conversation going broader than it should? Because this is not about all boards and a review of all boards' functions.
The way we have it posted is just chapter 2. The background was specific, but we're okay to discuss this.
Good. Rick, do you want to make a comment?
I think that in this case, Daniel has stated the process we went through. Julia and her team reviewed them and asked us to look at the options. We felt that in this case, with this specific board, they really needed to meet that number of times to cover what they had to cover. Now, in addition to that, they historically do tours of facilities to help look at those. They would need to post those as another, not meeting, but a possible quorum, I believe is the way you do that, or a committee. So from a staff perspective, we can cover the needs as they're defined with those 4 meetings. If you want them to do more, then that's going to take additional meetings. So I think
one of the
Daniel
comments.
stated it well.
All right. One of the comments I would have is the following: is that in many cases, council members appoint people to boards, and if you look at the qualifications of many of these board members, and you'd say, you know them, you've worked with them, but really, are their qualifications very specific to these positions? Meaning, do you have a parks background? Do you have a recreational background? The difference between board members and staff members is the following. Staff members are our, quote, experts in the field. Board members are very seldom experts in the fields on these boards. In fact, there's a huge learning curve for many board members because they don't have a background. But they are people we like, we know, someone recommended them. But that does not mean they have the same qualifications as our staff does. And that's the difference between, we use our staff to do the work because they're very specific at what they do. They manage parks. Their background is parks. And that's a big difference.
And, Mayor, I certainly appreciate that. I guess I just wonder why this even came up. I mean, if we're looking at, are we looking at all of the boards? And I have to confess, I look at my list of boards periodically to see if I have a vacancy, coming up and, to scan it. So I can't keep, in my memory bank all of the duties and responsibilities of the different boards. So, I just wondered what prompted us to single out civic events, to change their meeting date. Julia, is that you?
Julia or Teresa, you want to add comment to that?
So whenever we first started looking at Chapter 2, our main impetus was to add the holdover provision because we had some boards that were unable to meet because as people termed off, there was no provision allowing them to continue to serve until a suitable replacement was found. So that was the impetus. And while we were reviewing Chapter 2, that's when the other items came to light. So removing the monthly meeting requirements. Before, some of the boards did not have the ability to cancel a meeting. So we were gathering people and doing a staff report update that wasn't necessary just to fill time because we had to call a meeting. So there were some issues such as that which kind of prompted the thorough review.
So can we not do that same thing? If we know that board members are not going to be there for civic events, we can go ahead and cancel the meeting to where it doesn't waste any time?
If there's a lack of quorum that we know about in advance, we could cancel a meeting, or under this new provision where we could cancel meetings if there was no item to discuss or lack of quorum.
So if we maintain the same amount of meetings to stay consistent with the other advisory boards, we can have the authority to cancel those if quorum is known. And that would have to be going in and finding out what board members are going to be there if there is a quorum. So can we do that?
Well, I think the issue I'm having with your question is a very lawyerly issue, but the very basis of your question assumes that there is consistency amongst the advisory boards and how often they meet, and there's just not. The Water Advisory Board, for instance, only meets when this body asks them a question to meet on. The Parks Board meets every month, but that's because we have new programs, recreation programs that start very frequently, and only when we don't have something like that we need to take to them do we say, you don't need to meet. Because of the very narrow scope of what we ask this board, the Civic Events Board, to look at, it's only policies. We don't want those to change every month or every 12 months. Even fees is something else that they get asked about by the city staff. That's something that only occurs once a year. So because their scope is so narrow, it seems more appropriate to have them meet less often. But there is no consistency amongst the advisory boards as to how often they're calling meetings. Now, there's other boards that have quasi-judicial responsibilities. Yeah, we ask them to meet every month. And so it's like the zoning board, we don't want a developer to wait 2 months for the next meeting or to the next quarterly meeting. So we schedule those every month, but even those boards, occasionally there's no business and we call them. So looking at how that board functions and what their responsibilities are is the only reason that we set a schedule for any of them.
We're still limiting the amount of and I had a problem with this even though I voted for it to get it through this time, but I've had some concerns since. Limiting it to 4 and only 4 and not having the authority to say we need more than that and calling a meeting for it without having a council member do so. If we still have that provision in there that allows to cancel the meeting but to say if needed, I'm okay with, I think maybe every month or every other month. Every month would be too much. Every other month, maybe saying 6 meetings, 4 to 6 meetings, and having that range in there for them to be allowed to meet would
Daniel.
All we're saying is, from the staff's perspective, is this is what we feel is required. Any more than that, just because you may have a couple of board members who want to meet every month, I think that's really going above and beyond what really we should do as far as board meetings. And even when you're calling a board meeting, even every month, staff still has to prepare for those meetings. Even when we found out that we don't have quorum, we still had staff preparing, like if there was going to be a meeting. And when that meeting doesn't make, then we set that aside, and then we had to go to the next month, and here we go again, having to prepare all over again.
Just the civic events, they don't oversee fees.
We do a fee review every year.
But is
Fees
it
are not
advised?
I mean, we kind of consider that part of the administration and policies of those, in the facilities that they are tasked with reviewing policies and providing policies for, but they don't oversee, I mean, you oversee them.
They recommend.
We take fees to them for a recommendation, yes.
And to us to oversee. So a technicality term.
It really is what city council would prefer from an advisory board, not the other way around. It's not the advisory board dictating to the city council members when they should meet. It should be city council members taking a look at it and saying, hey, we feel that this will suffice. These number of meetings will suffice. And a lot of times, all we can do as staff is make a recommendation based on what we feel is appropriate. And that's what we're doing right now, is making that recommendation. But again, it is a city council decision, not a board's decision, but a city council decision how that's going to be handled.
And I do have Julia handed me the information on the fees that they do provide, some direction on increasing. It's additional tables after 20, chairs after 150, dinnerware, fencing, forklift, linen napkins, stage lighting, staging risers, table skirts, tablecloths, and water and coffee setup.
Okay. All right. With that, do I have a motion?
Well, just a quick question.
Wait,
So
sure, Tom.
If you don't, they meet quarterly, and then right there it says, call as needed, right? So if there's something important that pops up, they need to go, they can call it as needed.
And they have subcommittees that can meet as issues arise.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Move approval, Mayor.
A move, Tommy makes a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second? Do we have public comment?
Will their board they will be able to call as needed, or will they have to approach us to call as needed?
They can do it themselves. Of subcommittee, they can actually do that themselves. Is that correct, Teresa?
can call subcommittee meetings, but to call an actual meeting of the entire board that requires posting and all of those things, it would need to be a member of council. If you're not comfortable with having to wait the 2 weeks, there's nothing urgent this board reviews. If it's urgent, we won't take it to them, we'll just take it straight to you at the next council meeting. But if you want them to be able to meet on a more frequent basis, I mean, there's still the 72 hours notice, I would recommend that you authorize Daniel to be able to call a meeting versus you guys. But again, there's nothing urgent that this board hears. If it was that significant or that urgent, you guys would be the ones making the decision.
Wait, let's just a minute. We have someone at the podium.
But you already
We have
had
a
a motion.
motion.
Yes.
We have a second. We've asked for public comment. Public comment.
Thank you. Billy Nahara, Board Chair of Civic Events. Brought the issue up to our board. One of the things that I guess that I've heard is whether or not we've been able to meet quorums. Now, we've always met quorums. Anytime that we've canceled a meeting, it's always been staff that cancels for whatever reason, and we just oblige them because if they can't attend, what's the point of us coming up here? But meeting a quorum. Now, this is the thing. So you've got, 7 members of the board. We've all discussed it. We passed a motion asking for 8 meetings per year, okay? That's what we felt was necessary to discuss the things. And I don't know, Benny, I haven't seen you at a meeting, but do you follow what we talk about?
I do,
Okay.
absolutely. That
All right.
information comes back to me.
Yes, sir. Okay. So anyway, so we've got citizens who are willing to come out and serve. And the thing is really what's in question is not the number of times that we meet, but what the scope is. I think that's really the gist of it. Because as I've been on this board, our scope has diminished. I mean, we pass bylaws, we come vote them at city council, but then an ordinance is passed that contradicts the bylaws that you guys have voted and passed, if that makes any sense. So, I mean, for example, we discussed the budget, and then Ms. James says, well, that's really not in your scope. But when we're talking about fees and we're talking about things that happen at River Stage and the revenue that comes in, how do you separate the two? How do you not talk about it? I mean, I'm not saying that we have any basis or other than to make recommendations to the board about things that are going on at civic events. But I asked the civic events manager, do we bring value to you? And he said yes. And sometimes it's not a matter of, with the scope, it's sometimes just when the board meets and we're more consistent in the meetings, having the meetings when we need to and the things that we talked about, I think maybe helps him formulate some of the things that he's doing. Now, we're talking about being an expert. I used to be.
Your 3 minutes is
Yes.
up, so you need to wrap it up.
Yes, ma'am. I have been in the promotion business before, so I do have a little bit of background on that. But anyways, we voted. It was unanimous. We're asking for 8 meetings. Isn't 12? You're right.
Thank you very
22.
much.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
More public comment?
Yes, ma'am. Steve Hampton, District 6. My question is, how does this affect attendance? If you're not going to meet, what's the attendance? Because there are regulations on attendance. So how does that affect? And the other
Well, it wouldn't. They would be quarterly meetings,
you
which
just
would
get
be,
credited, whether you are,
they're posted like any other
and if
meeting.
you change it around, are you going to mess somebody's schedule so
It'd
they
be
can't
set
attend?
meetings.
Also, there's no, how can the board call a meeting of its own? We have administration, what if they have something to
subcommittees.
protest against the administration?
The subcommittees can meet on their own. Any regular meeting would, Teresa, you want to clarify that?
Does it require certain, 2 or 3 members?
Subcommittees can meet, because there's not a quorum in a subcommittee meeting, they can meet every day if they wanted to discuss an issue. As far as calling the other meetings, this is an advisory board, so one of the things when I went to speak to this board last week that they kept talking about is oversight and oversight. This is not an oversight board. We have numerous committees that are oversight, you being the most prominent one. This is not what the purpose of this board is. It's not for oversight. So it really is a very limited scope to advise on policies and administrative issues of a designated group of facilities. So again, if we want, there's nothing urgent on this board that couldn't wait for a city council member to actually direct them to have another meeting. If we think that there might be a need for us to allow them to meet more than 4 times a year, I would recommend that the city manager be the one that reviews and authorizes that, because he's the one that they're actually advising.
And again, this is the citizens' input to the administration. And if you start limiting and requiring and controlling somehow, then the common man has a right to give his opinion or be encouraged, be guided or taught otherwise. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment?
Julia, before he gets up here, is the provision for Daniel 2, is that something we need to add?
We'd need to amend the motion.
Hi, Del Velasquez, and I'm on the Civic Events Board as well. I had to leave the meeting, the last meeting, because it went way over an hour, and I already had another commitment to make, so I didn't get a chance to vote on the proposal to support the initiative to continue this quarterly or quarterly versus monthly meeting. I am on the side of meeting on a quarterly basis. As a board member, I find that we get into, I think would be a misunderstanding of what the word advisory means. We spend a lot of time talking about issues that really are not within our purview as an organization, as a board. We get into conversations that get into how the city should run its finances, or how the city should manage its property, or that aren't related to civic events. And so I, as one, would say that we could get everything done in a quarterly basis. I don't think there's a need for us to continue to be on a meeting on a regular basis as we've discussed. And I'd be glad to answer any of your questions relative to what I just said.
All right, so with no questions, so Tom, do we need to vote that down before you make an amendment, or what do you want to do?
Only if he's willing to make the amendment at this point.
Are you willing to make the amendment, or do you want to vote?
Yes, I'd like to stick with my current motion, also make the amendment that the city manager has the right to call additional meetings as needed.
Okay. That motion's on the
I
floor.
think I made the motion, didn't I?
Tommy
Yes, you
made the
did.
motion. We'd need
Yeah.
we'd need him to amend the
Tom
motion.
and Tommy, it gets a little, Tommy, Tommy, which one's? Go. Tommy, are you?
Look, I really don't, it doesn't matter to me, Daniel. Is that something?
That's fine with me. I mean, there'd have to be a special purpose for us holding a meeting. If I review it, I'll tell you that right now. But I'm okay with that. I don't have an issue with that.
You can make the decision.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, then I'll amend the motion to have still quarterly meetings with meetings called, if necessary, by the city manager.
And Tom, you second that?
My words exactly. I second
Exactly.
that.
All right, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. We will move, let's see, I think that was the last, if I'm not mistaken. Was K pulled? I didn't have that.
Okay,
No,
great.
so I think we approved that already. So with that, I think we have concluded our consent agenda conversation today. We will move into the regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are accepted from the time limit above and instead must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. There's some new language here.
Yes.
All right, so we are going to move into item A, public hearing and first reading for 1, an amendment to the zoning ordinance creating a new section 212, River Corridor District Overlay Zone, Downtown District Overlay Zone, and Cultural District Overlay Zone, and establishing standards for development within these zones, creating a new section 309, River Corridor District Overlay Zone, section 310, Downtown District Overlay Zone, and section 311, Cultural District Overlay Zone, and identifying their purpose, applicability, and review procedures, rezoning properties along the Concho River to apply the River Corridor Overlay Zoning District, rezoning properties generally located north of Neff's Way, east of Randolph Street, south of 3rd Street, and west of North Emmerich Street to apply the Downtown Overlay Zoning District, and rezoning properties generally located north of Avenue A, east of Oak Street, south of the Concho River to apply the cultural overlay zoning district. And 2, an amendment to the zoning ordinance revising the standards in Section 211 Historic Overlay Zone and Section 308 HO Historic Overlay Zone to clarify when a certificate of appropriateness is required, amending Section 12.04.017 River Corridor Area of the City Code of Ordinances, replacing the River Corridor Sign Review Area with the new River Corridor District, Downtown District, and Cultural District overlays, and repealing Article 12.06 River Corridor Development Ordinance. I know there's a lot of words,
You're only the 3.
and I am only down to 2, right? And I got 3 to go. An amendment to the zoning ordinance revising Section 301, establishment of districts by providing designations for river corridor, downtown, and cultural district overlay zones. I hope this is a very meaningful presentation and not just a lot of words and a lot of paperwork and a lot of staff time. Hopefully something positive comes out of all of this. You're on.
Give her some more. Give her some more to read, John.
No, but if you give me more to read, I can't shut up.
That we actually shrunk that down, if you can believe that. This does. You may recall you saw this just about a year ago. River Corridor, basically splitting the River Corridor into 3 new districts: the River Corridor, Downtown, and Cultural District. Some of the discussion at that time was about whether or not to expand the districts. So for today, all we're bringing you is the creation of the ordinances that create these districts. We've left the discussion of expanding the districts to a later date. And so today we won't be talking about expanding these districts, but we will be talking about splitting the river corridor into those 3 districts. So you'll see when we get to the maps, if you're not in the river corridor today, you're not going to be in one of these new districts. But some of the areas that are currently in the river corridor will stay in river corridor. Some will move into a new downtown district, and some will become part of the cultural district. But the rules will apply throughout all 3.
So what's the purpose then?
Part of what we're doing is setting up for some future amendments that will perhaps have some different rules for the river corridor and different rules for downtown or the cultural district. So this is kind of the first step to create the 3 different districts. It also clarifies what can be approved by the staff versus going to the Design and Historic Review Commission, and I'll give you a little bit of detail about that in a minute. It repeals the existing river corridor because we're moving it from the Code of Ordinances into the zoning ordinance.
And the purpose of that?
It cleans up the procedural aspects because we already have all of the procedures in place for zoning property in the zoning ordinance. But because the river corridor is not in the zoning ordinance, it's in a separate section of the code. That's created some issues with the zoning procedures don't necessarily apply because it's not within the zoning ordinance. So that's really just moving it from one part of the ordinance to the other. We cleaned up some duplication. There were some things under historic zoning that were in 2 different places in the ordinance, and that's often a recipe for if you change it in one place and don't change it in the other, then it creates some conflicts. So we just deleted it in one of the 2 places and left it in the other, as well as cleaning up some cross-referencing and some numbering. And then finally, revising some, or actually, as I mentioned to your question, creating these processes within those 3 districts and historic overlays. Again, that's more of a cleanup than a change to anything that's currently happening. One change that we are making, as you'll see, is reviewing exterior work that doesn't require a building permit. Right now, if you're in a historic district or the river corridor, we only review what you do to a building if you need a building permit. So for example, adding new landscaping or putting up a new fence or repainting your building a different color, none of those things requires a building permit. And so right now we don't have the ability to review those. Part of what brought this issue up to begin with was the concern about some of those things happening, particularly in downtown, where somebody, the example that I use is the business that painted their building yellow and green stripes. Well, lots of people came to us and said, hey, why can't you do anything about that? And this would fix that so that we at least have a review. But as you'll see, we've proposed a simplified process. If all you're doing is painting your building, you don't have to go through a bunch of hoops. You don't have to go to the Design and Historic Review Commission. That'll be a simplified process.
But that process, they still come forward
They
to
would
the
still-
planning department.
They would, although if all they're doing is painting and they want to use a paint that's on an accepted historic color palette, that'll be you come in, you get your approval literally while you wait. It wouldn't be 2-3 days. It wouldn't be a month waiting for the next commission meeting. It would be a very simplified process.
And there'd be no fee attached.
Well, that's a question we have for you all, is whether or not that, our recommendation is not to have a fee for that since it's such a simplified process, but we wanted your input on that. I included this map just so if there were any questions. This was the original proposal that included some expansion of the river corridor, but as I mentioned, today we're not proposing any expansion of those boundaries. So this is what we are actually proposing today. Everything that's currently river corridor, you can see that it splits out the downtown. Again, that's already regulated under the river corridor. We're just splitting it into a separate district we'll call the downtown district. And then you can see the cultural overlay, very small right now. Our goal is to, as we discussed with you last year, make it match pretty closely with the museum's cultural district, which is kind of a larger area here. But again, we want to bring that back later.
And why would the museum have a cultural district overlay that is different than what we're presenting, instead of making sure that as it's presented that everybody is on the same playing field here?
Well, that may be a question for another day on where those boundaries get drawn, but in short, there's some question of, one of the things we'll discuss today is how we treat single-family homes. Do we exempt them completely? That was one of the recommendations that came out of our discussions. And much of this area that's in the museum's cultural district are single-family homes. And so if we exempt single-family homes, then maybe those areas don't need to be in this proposed cultural district.
Okay.
So I'm going to briefly go through the summary of proposed changes. You'll note that there are some things stricken out because we're not expanding the boundaries today. The original proposal was to eliminate the Fort Concho and Old Town districts. Those would have been incorporated into the new cultural district, but because we're not doing that today, we're not repealing those yet. Again, we'll come back to you.
So what district do they lie in?
Well, if you're in the current Fort Concho district, you'll stay in the Fort Concho district. Again, we want to come back to you to create this new cultural district later on that will encompass not only the existing areas, but the Fort Concho and the Old Town districts.
How do you
pulling them
differentiate
all
between the
together.
cultural district and the downtown historic district when you're talking about properties that are historic, meaning Fort Concho and Old Town? So what's the fine line between which direction, in which area they're located? Because they're both historic, and downtown district or historic overlays would seem to apply.
That's exactly right, and that's a good question. If you're in the river corridor or one of these new downtown or cultural districts, there's a bar of regulation that you have to meet. If you're historically zoned, that bar is higher, so it's a different review standard. And so if you're in both the river corridor and a historic district, the historic district rules are what apply because they're the more restrictive. And one of the changes that this would do is not require that you go through both processes. You wouldn't have to get a river corridor approval and a historic approval. If you're in both districts, you just have to do the more restrictive one. That's part of the cleanup in this proposal. I've already mentioned this one about the issues that don't require a building permit. But again, it would only apply to exterior remodeling. If you're doing something inside the building, these ordinances don't really speak to that. It's really the exterior appearance that we're concerned about. Real quickly, what can be approved by staff versus the commission? We've recommended a few changes. To be consistent with some other ordinances, we've changed the 1,000 square feet from 1,200. So if you're building a small little outbuilding, for example, that can be approved by staff. Any larger expansion or new construction would have to go to the commission. It also would allow staff to approve signs under 50 square feet, any painting, landscaping, fences, walls, telecommunications towers that are less than 35 feet, and any construction not visible from a public street, as well as temporary structures and food parks. All of those would go through an administrative review, which would be a simplified process. Anything that doesn't meet those criteria would still have to go to the commission. And I should add that in any case where there's some opposition or staff isn't sure whether or not we should be approving it, we can always send it to the commission for their input as well in those cases. It also, similar to some other changes you may recall in other ordinances, this would expand the definition of who can appeal. Right now, it's only the applicant who can appeal. This would allow a neighbor who may be next door to the business to appeal if they don't like the decision of the commission or of the staff in those cases. But it also allows staff to appeal those decisions, and those appeals would come to you all. One of the discussions that came up with this last year was looking at like-for-like remodeling. If you're replacing bricks with the exact same kind of bricks, or you're replacing a window with the same window, right now we have no simplified process for that. But this creates that like-for-like process, which is much more simplified, staff review, and you all created a lower fee for that review. And as I mentioned...
So did we approve, just to refresh our memory, did we approve a reduced fee or no fee for like?
It was a reduced fee. It was not a zero fee.
So today, if I'm replacing my front door with the same front door I've always had, but it's just old and it needs replaced, I have to pay a fee to do that?
That's correct.
Seems a little difficult to swallow.
I think
how much is it?
Part of the issue there is they still do have to come in and give us the material sheets and the descriptions and those things that we review to make sure it in fact is a like-for-like change into the building. And so they still do have to come in and we review that. And so that was the reason that there is a process.
There'll be a lot of challenge
fee.
to that. Okay. Harry, just 1 second, Lane.
I just want a clarification on this. Where you're only talking about the river corridor, the cultural district, and the downtown district when you're talking about replacing a like for like. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Anywhere else,
so
right?
you're not talking abroad. Okay.
No, just these 3 districts.
Okay.
All right, Lane, did you have a question or comment?
Exactly how long does it take to look at a picture of what they have and if I present and say I'm replacing it with this, I think that should be one of those where it's painting your outside of your house, get the permit right away in-house. If you go in there and review it at that same time, and I don't think I could support a fee for like on that.
All right, we'll continue to discuss that. I think that's a question many of us have. And now, Lucy, I think you had a question or comment.
Yes, John, I just wanted to ask you, what's the fee amount?
$90.
I think that might be going to 0, but we'll continue to discuss. All right, and then it says also establishes a simplified process for reviewing paint colors, and there's an established paint color historic palette that is pretty much accepted by all cities in terms of historic color palettes, correct?
That's correct. There are standard historic color palettes either through the Department of Interior that reviews historic buildings, but also Sherwin-Williams has their, you
Historic
can go to
palette.
them and they have a historic sheet that they can show you all the colors. And so that, yes, anything on one of those historic palettes would be considered acceptable. And as I mentioned, our proposal would be to have a no-fee simplified review for that. I just wanted to mention here that the Planning Commission did recommend different boundaries for these districts than what the DHRC recommended. But as I mentioned today, we're not looking at any of those boundary issues. So our recommendation is to approve all of these amendments as presented, but then we do have these outstanding questions. If you're only changing the building color and it's on a historic palette, should it be no fee? Another question is what to do about single-family homes. A couple of the commenters, when this came up to you all before, questioned whether or not, if it's my home, should I have to go through this process? And if so, should there be fees? And so that's really these two questions. One of the suggestions was simply to exempt single-family homes. One of the discussion points at the Planning Commission was, well, what if we exempt single-family homes except those right next to the river? So if you can see it from the river, then maybe we still care about what it looks like. So these are really questions for you all, and whatever direction you give us today, we can make those changes and bring it back on second reading with whatever changes you recommend.
Well, why don't we start by answering or challenging or commenting on the outstanding questions before we go back to the previous slide. And so we'll start with 1, no fee if only changing building color and approved administratively. I strongly believe we should not have a fee for like or for choosing a color within the historic color palette. The question that comes up is, okay, so I've now painted my house and it's not a historic color palette. Now what happens? Or my building, because we're not talking houses yet. So I've painted my building and it's purple, and purple's not on the historic color palette. What happens?
Well, first of all, I think our proposal at least would still be to have a review process. They would still have to come in and show us what they want to do. There would just not be a fee for it.
All right, just to clarify
but
that.
But if they did go out and paint something without coming in and getting approval first, it would be our normal enforcement process where we would send them a notice of violation or contact them, ultimately potentially issuing citations that would go to municipal court if they didn't follow up and fix it.
Okay. So then, does anybody have another question on 1? We'll move on. Okay, on item 2, exempt detached single-family homes. If so, all of those not adjacent to the river. My perspective is the following is that we should exempt single-family homes, but I still support those adjacent to the old river corridor concept that they have to maintain the historic color palette. That river corridor is very important to us in terms of preserving our river, what it looks like, how it's seen, etc. Comments from council?
That map
Lane, would you like to comment? Yes, go ahead, Tommy.
John, I think this is a two-part question. It's one question in my mind, but has 2 parts. How many single-family homes do we have in total in these 3 possibly new districts? Do you know?
I don't.
Do you know? Okay, then my other part of my question was, do you know how many single-family homes are within that river corridor?
No, it's dozens of homes, so it's more than just a handful. But I'm sorry, I didn't get those numbers of the total.
But those people today, Tommy, that have always had their home in the river corridor have always had to live with the river corridor rules. So it would not be putting more restrictions on restrictions that already existed for those homes that are in the river corridor. And I think the biggest issue is really in the cultural district, not the river corridor district or the downtown district, but in fact the cultural district, if in fact it's ever expanded beyond the Howard Taylor expansion versus this roadmap, right. I believe. Yes.
I don't think anybody
Lane, would you like to talk?
Yeah, I don't think anybody on that corridor would be painting outrageous in the first place, given where they are.
We would hope not, but you know, strange things happen overnight sometimes.
Somebody else could come and buy it.
Yeah.
Moves in from California.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so if you go back then to the 3 points, do we need to take action, Julie, on each one of these outstanding questions with a motion? Or how do you need us to address this?
No, this would just be part of the overall motion.
I know, but it's going to be, I had to read a lot, so the motion could be a lot of words. So just being clear, if we need to take a motion to address
What
these
you could-
issues specifically, then we move on to something else. But I think we need, Harry, you're smiling. Would you make a motion on these 3 items?
You can give staff direction.
Okay, so we don't need to vote. Is that right? Do you have the direction you need?
I think as long, well, you ultimately will have to vote on this, but if you give us direction on each of these, and then whoever makes the motion could say, approve as presented with the changes as recommended.
I think we'll just take a motion right now, Harry.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that as presented, including the 3 items that we have here, supporting the staff to do this.
On the no fee and like for like, so that would mean no fee for like, or changing building color as long as it's the historic color palette.
As stated here on this, is no fee exempt for the single-family homes except along the adjacent to the river, and no more permit fee for the single-family.
Okay. With that, do I have a second? Lane, were you Lane is seconding that? All right. So with that, let's take public comment. With no public comment, we'll take a vote. So all in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
All right. So that passes 7-0. All right. Next, John, is that it?
That's it.
For all that word, all of that,
Read
and
it
that
again,
was
Mayor.
it?
I assume the motion was not just for these, but to adopt everything else as presented.
Correct.
Okay, Then that's it.
You're done, at least on that part. All right, so then we are going to item B. Consider ratifying a resolution by COSA DC authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute a memorandum of understanding with the city of San Angelo, providing funding not to exceed $13,000 for a project for air service marketing and recruitment services. Jeremy, you're on.
Excuse me,
Oh, yes.
Mayor, I need to recuse myself from this. The potential vendor is a client of mine.
Already.
Good morning, council, mayor, staff.
Good morning.
Jeremy Valgartson representing the San Angelo Airport today. Brian, do I have slides? Well, I'm excited to stand here and present this proposal to you today. It's always exciting when we try and grow the airport. As you know, we're working through the master plan at the airport, and part of the master plan is to take a real in-depth look at capacity and demand. And so looking at the terminal, is the terminal, runways, and taxiways built big enough? Is it large enough to handle a second airline or additional air service? And so fortunately, the FAA paid for the majority of this study because these air service studies can get quite expensive. But the FAA paid for most of the data to be collected to see if we would need a second airline or additional air service over the next 5, 10, 20-year plan. A lot of you have already seen the numbers. They're pretty astonishing, but San Angelo is set. We're in a very good position for a second airline or for additional air service. We've reached out to the public. We've had public meetings throughout the master plan, and it never fails. At the end of every meeting, when we have open questions, they always say, when are we getting another airline? Or when are we getting another route? So the public has spoken, and they want another route. And this isn't a coincidence, but just yesterday a study came out. It was a non-biased study that said San Angelo Airport is ranked as the 5th best opportunity for adding air service in the lower 48.
Fifth
best out of
340
airports.
Wow.
We're number 5. So this is strictly based off of load factor and profitability.
And have we posted that with a text message and used social media to get that message out there so everyone is looking at us?
We have not yet.
Okay.
You said it just barely came out, right? You said
Came out yesterday.
Yesterday,
Yes.
okay.
Let's
so
get it
you
out
haven't
there.
gotten the ball on that yet?
Yeah, come on.
I'm sorry. So a lot of you have seen these numbers, so I'll go through these fairly quickly, but here's our load factor. You can see the green line is Abilene, the blue line is San Angelo, and then the yellow is Midland Field. So our load factors are high. The line of profitability for the older aircraft they're bringing in now is about 70%. As long as you're over 70%, you're making money. With the new 175s they brought in, it's dropping down around the 65% line. So American Airlines, their current route is doing well and making money. The RASM, what this stands for is revenue per available seat mile. And the black line is the profitability curve, and it's also the airline service cost curve. So the higher above that line, the more money the airline's making. The yellow dots are probably hard to see, but this shows 1,500 routes nonstop routes. And you can see the San Angelo dot. It's not formatted too well on here, but the San Angelo dot, we have the highest profitability rate in all of the regional airports in the state of Texas. And within 1,500 miles, we're in the top 5% as far as profitability goes. This shows leakage. So they took, within a 60-mile radius of the San Angelo airport, they took everybody's zip code and found out what airport they're actually booking tickets out of. 50% of the people within 60 miles of San Angelo are booking and flying out of San Angelo. 30% are flying out of Dallas. 10% are going out of San Antonio.
May I ask a question real quick? Is that based off of the zip code they're living in or the zip code of their credit card?
It's a zip code of the credit card, ma'am.
Because that gets to be a little difficult to read, but I know it's this.
Right.
Okay, but just to be clear.
Right. And then another 10% are flying out of Austin. So the big picture of it is a family of 5 can't afford to fly out of San Angelo. They're driving to Dallas. They're driving somewhere else because our rates, our average airfare is about $303 for a one-way ticket. So it's expensive to fly out of San Angelo. So the message we've got is rates are high, yields are high, profitability is high, and our load factors are high. And 50% of the people in this market can be captured by a second airline or by an additional route from American.
Or reduced phase.
Yes. So we're ranked 30th out of 350 as far as our average one-way fare. And then 28.22 cents per seat per mile. That's the profitability of the airline out for American. So we're ranked 32nd out of 350 nationwide airports in the highest yields. Economic benefit, so if we are able to land a second airline or even an additional route, we're looking at more commerce out of the airport. Additional airline could be 10 to 20 more jobs directly at the airport. Increases competitiveness for federal funding. And then it'll open San Angelo to more business opportunities. We've heard from several companies within San Angelo that they need another route to get their people in and out. So what are we asking for? We're asking for money from Costa DC. We want to use Costa DC's money to finish out this contract. It's going to be in the amount of about $13,000, $12,700 for us to finish collecting the data and then to present us in front of some airlines with this data.
And then who would be presenting the data to the airlines?
So we'll take the consultant with us. Landrum and Brown has been doing the financing for the master plan, and then a few city representatives and Centurion.
All right, so you're asking for $12,700 to complete the report, and then that also pays for making the trip to various airlines to sell the concept?
That's correct. That's the portion that's ineligible for the FAA to pay for.
All right. Do I have further questions from council on Jeremy's? I mean, obviously, when you look at the numbers, you can't believe someone's not lining up and begging to be a part of the Mathis-Field San Angelo Regional Airport. So it's amazing. We have to go out when these numbers are very available to all airlines, correct?
Correct.
But we got to do it.
That's right. Yeah.
There's huge opportunity, and I think it's something that requires our support. So do I have questions from council?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Lane, a second by Lucy. Any public comment? No public comment. Jeremy, stay up here a minute. Let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. I continually am getting questions about hangars and the need for hangars. When can we put up more hangars? Where are the hangars going to go? So do we have an upcoming meeting planned with the master developers so we can move forward on the hangar issues?
Yeah, we do. In fact, I'm meeting with them Friday internally, and
Okay.
we've got a sketch, Mayor, that I'd be happy to sit down and show you the sketch.
Thank you very
and the
much.
proposal. Yes, ma'am.
All right, we'll move on to item C, discussion and consideration of body-worn camera program for San Angelo Police Department. Frank, you're on. Police Chief Frank Carter, please come forward. Oh, yeah. Tommy, if you're in house, come on in.
Police Chief Frank Carter. Good morning, Mayor.
Morning.
Good morning, Council. I would like to invite Sergeant Griff to the podium to go through the presentation and any questions you may have. He's worked on this project for about 4 years. So, Sergeant Griff.
First off, I'd like to thank the council for allowing us to be here today. My name is Travis Griffith. I'm a sergeant with the San Angelo Police Department, and would like to talk to you about something I've been working on for about 4 years. So I'm glad to be here. I think I have a presentation that's a PowerPoint. We're ready to rock and roll on that. This right here? Down arrow. Always go with the down arrow. But to get started, I'd like to talk to you about the current state of our department in regards to our digital evidence. When I talk about digital evidence, that can be any video that we ingest from our in-car systems or pictures that are taken in the field by our officers or our crime scene technicians. Right now, we're currently using some antiquated systems. Our current provider, we need to replace 110 in-car systems. That's been a can that's been kicked down the road for a while, and that's kind of where we're at right now. The issues that we're seeing with our in-car systems is that we can't buy parts anymore. We can't buy that model. We're really out of any options in regards to our current system. We've been actually buying parts on eBay and even whole systems from other departments that have gotten rid of them long ago. So that's the battle that we've been facing for some time. The current in-car system does not collect adequate digital evidence, and that's just, it is what it is. We currently have had issues even getting just simple audio. So imagine if an officer goes to a large building to do an alarm. If he goes around the side of that building and that has any type of real structure to that building, we're probably going to lose audio. It's line of sight, it's directly tethered to the car, and so if that officer's involved in some sort of situation, then that's not going to be recorded. We're not going to have any audio. We're not going to have any video. At this time, it's difficult to capture even the simplest of a video. If an officer is in a low light area, or even if the sun is shining it just right, it completely eliminates our ability to see the simplest of things. So I want to address body-worn cameras and kind of where we're at today. The benefits of body-worn cameras go well beyond this, but I'm trying to keep your time short and sweet. I know it's precious. Transparency is the number one thing we look for. We're trying to show our citizens that we do this job because we care, and that our actions are based off of that. We want to see a reduction in complaints against officers. Pretty much anyone that we've spoken to, any cities and sister cities we've looked at, they've seen a substantial reduction in officer complaints. We've also seen a reduction in, increase in the conviction rates. So that we've looked at a lot of data trying to establish what is out there, and one thing we'll get into is DWIs. There's some data that's actually established of increase in DWIs and family violence. We see in-car system integrations. So right now, if we do have a paid pilot program that we're using for body-worn cameras, there's no interaction between those two systems. So an officer would have to go in and log on the in-car system, provide that necessary data to label that video, and then do the same thing on his in-car system. So you're tying that officer up in the current system we have in place. We need a digital evidence management system. Right now it's being handled by a sergeant that is in charge of that. His overtime rate is through the roof right now because he's trying to keep up with an antiquated system to be able to share that data to the prosecutors and people that are involved. And also different vendors that we've looked at, the CAD RMS integration system would basically allow for us to be able to categorize the video without the officer having to put his hands on that. So the important thing is right now is the state mandates that we manage our videos for certain amounts of time based off of the crime. So for instance, a DWI, regardless of what the the level of that DWI, has to be kept for 10 years. We're maintaining that video, everything associated with that case for 10 years, no matter what. That's a state mandate. So if we don't label those videos properly under the current system, within 6 months, it can get kicked out. And we don't want to see a case lost or a victim that somehow gets slips through the crack because we're not managing that video properly. So here's where we're getting at in reduction of complaints and the reduction of use of force. And I'm going to kind of touch on this. When I say reduction of use of force, anytime you bring a body-worn camera into the situation, when an offender sees that you're automatically going to see a better result, and just the data shows it. So you're less likely to use force there. So I don't want you to think that just we have a bunch of bad officers out there, because Rialto, California observed a 59% decrease of officers using force. That's a lot going on there. So no matter, you could be the best officer in the world, you bring a body-worn camera to the situation, it's going to make you think twice about what you're doing and keep yourself a little bit more. It's like that Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder, you know what I mean? Some cities have noted an 87% reduction in complaints filed against officers. We looked at trying to quantify the amount of time our supervisors spend taking complaints against officers without an official complaint. And that's hard to do because that happens a lot. And people will call in and say X, Y, and Z happened, and that patrol sergeant will do the review of that and find out what's going on with it. So those numbers are actually hard to kind of quantify. With this in place, it would be able to reduce that number substantially and put the supervisor back where they need to be in the field. So why is it a necessity? I hope that we're kind of covering the ground behind why we're doing what we're doing. I'm a big proponent of spending our money where we need to spend it. And this is something that I think is where we need to be at. The body-worn camera have strengthened communities' understanding of police actions and fostered transparency. In the various communities that I've talked to over the past 4 years, we've seen departments enjoy a much cleaner and simpler transparency with their citizens, because if it's recorded, it's pretty straightforward. If we did what we're supposed to do, we're on the right path. Departments all across America have better relationships with the public and increased public trust with the implementation of body-worn cameras. And the incidents have occurred that could have been controversial or questionable if video evidence did not exist. And that's important to remember that in today's times, there's a lot of stuff that goes on out there. And if we can get that video out there to the public, released, to be able to show what happened, where it's at, and kind of the conclusion of that event, it can help us as a city and as a community. Body-worn cameras improve evidence gathering of all types. And I listed this here because family violence is important to me. I think that something that we run into a lot in seeing that is if you're able to get in there as a prosecutor and kind of see that victim, see the circumstances inside that house that we've never been able to do at this point and as a department, it's able to give you a real firsthand indication of what's going on there. Narcotics investigations, also consent searches. The state was looking at possibly passing a bill in regards to it being a mandatory that's recorded on in-car system, on a body-worn camera. So that's coming, I think, eventually. So getting ahead of that would be beneficial for us as a city. Assaults and shootings of police officers. So if for whatever reason that officers become incapacitated, if we don't have that, we're using an outdated system, it'd be hard to identify that suspect. If we have something that's firsthand right there with what happened to the officer, we'd be able to get that information out to the field immediately to the other officers working to attempt to locate the suspect. Departments have developed many department that have developed. I'm sorry. Departments that have deployed body-worn cameras have seen increases in conviction rates. This is the DWI. That when we did our research on this, we were looking for something to be able to quantify the benefits of body-worn cameras. This is out of Newport News, Virginia. They saw about a 20% increase of guilty pleas when officers had body-worn cameras. There's not a whole lot of data out there to be able to establish this is one particular thing that I believe, just from what we've done with our paid trial program, we have seen it's a much easier working with our district attorney and our county attorney and our city attorney in regards to being able to show what occurred on those scenes. With the unit that I work in, it's called the anti-crime unit. We do, all of our guys have cameras, and we've seen an increase in our prosecution rates, I believe, just off of the usage of this small deployment. So San Angelo is one of the last departments in the area that has not gone full deployment. You look at nearby agencies with body-worn cameras, that include the Tom Green County Sheriff's Office, the Ballinger Police Department, the Texas Department of Public Safety, Abilene, Odessa, and Midland all have widespread deployment of body-worn cameras. This is a current in-car video system. These pictures are taken from what we're using today. And I show these here because this is, and I try to be fair. I went through and got the best pictures I could find and that were a fair representation of the system to date. So as you can see, the middle camera is a night view system. That's just with a normal light bar running in front of it. The one on the left is just an average day, sunny blue skies. And then the one on the right is a little bit cloudy. If you note, the one on the right, if there's something going on there in that picture to the left in that picture, it'd be very difficult to see what's going on at all. There is a truck, it looks like, and a car, but anything in between that, I'd have a difficulty making that out. And those are just screenshots from our current in-car system.
Do we have screenshots of what it would look like if you had, or other police departments that have these cameras, what the difference in the picture quality is?
What I do have right here is the next slide is this is our current screenshot from a trial program of a body-worn camera. We did trial the in-car system, and I can tell you that it's just as good as this one. We've looked at different providers, and we're going to select a vendor later on. But this is where our current trial program is kind of like a paid trial is what I've referred to it as. This is the screenshot of a traffic stop on 306. This is the same provider. It's the body-worn cameras from our trial program. This is more of a residential screenshot to show what you're looking at. So imagine if it's your family member or somebody that you care about involved in something, this would be the clarity you'd see to either prove innocence or guilt. In conclusion, if we implement, we can expect to see improved investigations, reduction in complaints, enhanced transparency, decreased use of force, increased conviction rates, elimination, loss or destruction of evidence, streamlines the labeling of digital evidence, provides a chain of custody, and simplifies dissemination of digital evidence. So one thing I didn't really touch on is that with certain providers of body-worn cameras, you can see that they can disseminate their videos and pictures in a very simple way, so you don't have to make a copy of a video or anything like that. You can actually just make that available to the prosecutor to view online. I believe it is our responsibility as a city to supply our law enforcement officers with up-to-date tools to capture the inevitable police interactions with the public. When this is accomplished, it helps foster transparency, obtains the best evidence for court, and protects our employees. As I said in closing, I just want to say that the last 4 years has been a lot of ups and downs. We tried lots of different cameras, and I think that this is the way we're seeing law enforcement move as citizens actually expect it. Being one of the only officers that wears a body-worn camera, it's always a topic of conversation because they expect that. They think all the officers have them and things of that nature. So I believe that after everything we've looked at, that this is a good move for us in regards to moving us into the 21st century.
The question I have is, you've been working on this for 4 years, and I understand that there have been grants available over the past 5 years for body cams. Why have we not applied for these before?
So I can refer to the chief on some of this, but what I can say is that the grants that are available are out there, and we've applied for, I know in 2016 we had applied for one, and we're currently in the process of the application process now. I think there's a lot of infrastructure issues inside the department that we've been looking at and making the right moves when they need to be made, and this is kind of where we're at right now. Anything to add to that, Chief?
We just currently applied for a $500,000 grant. I believe it was 2016 we did get a grant. It was specifically for the Panasonic camera. Council did not approve the match.
Yeah, is this the same camera, the Panasonic camera that you're?
Company.
No, same
Yes.
company, yeah.
Our in-cars are Panasonic, yes, but we recently applied for a $500,000 grant.
Is that what many of the cities have used as part of their funding for their, to get their cameras?
I think each city faces their own set of financial issues. Some cities have chosen to go with there's a state grant and there's also a federal grant. Those are not always the simplest to get, and I think in 2017 it was not available. So you have to play that as it comes along, and I know that the chief and the administration, and along with the city staff, has looked at when and how. We know this has been coming. We've been trying to put a Band-Aid on stuff. That's why we've looked at purchases for eBay and things of that nature to get us by, because we wanted to make the right move. And so we want to be able to see a deployment of in-car systems that work with our body-worn systems that ultimately can see a deployment of also weapon systems. So those are all infrastructure issues inside our departments that we're facing, that they're into life. I mean, it is what it is. I wish there was an easy button to be able to save us some money, but I think it's time that we have to make that decision.
I don't think it's about saving money. I think it's looking at all the resources that are out there to help us finance it more than an easy decision.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I think the big picture is that the body cams, to me, are a pretty important part of law enforcement, and I think we need to be a part of the technology that's out there to help us do a great job of protecting the citizens and ensuring that the work that you do is supported by the information provided by body cameras. So I do not question the need for this upgrade or technology, whichever you want to call it, in terms of protecting you, protecting the citizens, and making sure that we get the convictions that we need when we need them. So I'm going to, Lane has a question, I think.
Out of all of the candidates for the companies that y'all are looking at, is the preferred one the picture that we saw?
I would prefer we don't talk about actual vendors at this meeting. That will come back to you when we decide to make a purchase. This really should just be about whether or not.
This will be an RFQ or an RFP when we
There
go
will
out.
be, yes.
Can
Or
I ask if
we
they're all
could potentially
comparable
buy
in
it through
price?
some sort of other source, but I would prefer not to talk about vendors at this meeting. This
Yeah.
is just about policy and program.
And price will come at a time when RFQs or RFPs are put through.
Right, and Travis is wearing one right now, one of the ones they're testing.
How do we
so
look?
Y'all smile.
There it is.
Good. Council always looks good.
Oh, you're a sweetheart.
answer. That's
Yeah,
a
good answer. You're smart. Yeah.
What I was kind of
Lucy-
getting at for
Just a
that.
minute, Lucy had a question.
I just have a quick
Yes, ma'am.
question, Travis. Have you spoken to the other cities? Had they had any problems with the camera as far as them going on the blink all of a sudden, or not being able to use them at, anything like that?
So we've looked at numerous different vendors, and we've done in-field training and deployment of those to test them out. And through that process, we've seen some issues with certain providers, and without going into detail before Ms. James gets on to me, I can tell you that we have seen issues with certain cameras, and there's certain cameras that stand out.
I was talking about as far as the other cities, the police officers in other cities. Have you spoken to them, and have they told you about any circumstances that had occurred?
Yes, ma'am. So I can tell you, just even locally, we had an officer that was doing a trial program with a body-worn camera that he received a complaint, and it would have been a very serious complaint, and that of almost like a criminal in nature. And that complaint was easily debunked, for lack of a better word. And so we see that all over, and that's why you're looking at a 80% reduction in some departments and complaints, because once you bring somebody in and set them down and say, hey, here's our body camera, we're going to watch, in regards to your complaint, generally people are like, well, I didn't quite remember it that way. And that's what we find, when you get contacted by anybody, it's like going to the principal's office. Sometimes, your adrenaline gets up there and you're trying to remember exactly what happened. And you're just upset that you're in trouble. That can happen with citizens. And so we want to bring that level playing field in to show, hey, if our officers are doing wrong, that we will handle that and do what's appropriate. And if our officers are doing right, then we're going to make sure that we stand behind them and support them.
The positive, negative to other cities having the hardware at this point is learning from other cities what has worked, what has not.
Yes, ma'am.
Recommendations or insight into best practices. So, Lane, did you have another question or
What I was
comment?
trying to touch on is we've heard the number $1.6 million, and for the candidates that are out there for what we think is going to be the best quality, is that where we averaged out that number, or did we just average the kind of cost comparison between them all? Because what I'm shooting for is the quality. When I go buy a tool, I'm going to go and get the best of the best, because I know that the quality is going to outlive.
I won't get into Miss James is giving me that look, so I won't get into a whole lot of detail. But what I can tell you is that we have looked at. We're in a very particular spot. Some cities just need body-worn cameras, right? Right now, we're in the place where we need in-car systems, and we need body-worn cameras, and we also need weapon systems. So we're looking at what our best option is in regards to who can provide the best quality of if you want, let's call it a tool, that to be able to do our job.
Before I got there.
and that's kind of where we're at on that.
Harry had a question.
Yes, just real quickly. You got an estimation on how much staff time you will be able to save by having these body cameras?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
What we commonly refer to as soft dollars. We see a substantial freeing up of time to both officers and our crime scene techs and our supervisors. So right now, I'll just give you a quick example of what we run into as a supervisor. If we have a pursuit, then that requires like a cheek to be done. So that sergeant's going to go and watch that videos of everybody that's involved. Well, that's if you have a 25-minute pursuit, right? Then you're going to have to watch 4 different officers' videos for 25 minutes each. With certain providers out there, we're able to watch all 4 videos at one time and be able to cut that down to 25 minutes. And that's just one example. In regards to sharing that, disseminating our digital evidence to our prosecutors, that we're going to see substantial savings in that area to be able to get that done substantial. I can give you that.
Teresa.
Yeah, I'd like to add a component to the staff time. The other way that this video is used is we get requests for public information for camera video from cars. And right now, there's a specific process that you have to request body cam video in a very specific way. The public hasn't really figured out what that way is yet, so a lot of body cam footage we're not releasing because we're not getting a proper request. But what we see in city attorneys' offices is that often it's just more footage that we have to review to determine whether or not there needs to be redactions and those sorts of things before it's released. I think that we have somewhat of a buffer against the expanded time that's going to take our office, because right now our system is very antiquated and it takes such a long time even to find the right video that we're wasting time on that. But I know that Abilene, when I talked to them, their city attorney's office, since I've left, hired an additional attorney. That's related more to litigation than body cams, but they're considering hiring another one to review body cam footage. But they don't have somebody in PD helping them. So on the public information side, cities typically do see some increase in staff time because it's that many more cameras that we need to review. And in addition, the prosecutor, she does have to review all of that video for prosecution, even in municipal court. So it's going to add some to her time as well.
So you're not going to see necessarily a reduction in dollars of employees, more efficiency and time that they can spend doing other tasks that are
Specifically what
limited.
she's talking about, I have
Yeah.
a supervisor, and that's all he does. He's drawing a salary, $60,000, $70,000. He has to sit there and manually look and go through each video and each video request. We're paying him roughly $25,000 extra a year in overtime just to stay caught up. The last time I checked, he was some 400 videos behind. To piggyback off your question there, Lane, we got a bid. We have Panasonic in-car videos. Ironically, we got a bid yesterday from Panasonic just to replace the 110 cameras in the car was $820,000 just for the in-car cameras, excluding the tasers and the body cam. So just the cameras alone for the car.
Was that received on an RFQ or an RFP or what?
I'm not sure where that, probably, I mean, that's how they do things. And that's one reason it's
Daniel?
taken so long, is that
Yeah.
they wanted to evaluate all of these cameras, because there are processes where you can avoid the bid process through interlocal co-ops or those, purchasing co-ops. And so in order to utilize a purchase off of one of those for a purchase this big, my recommendation to them was that they study a number of cameras to make sure we're not only getting the one that's selling it the best, that's actually used the best. And I'll say the chief has done a really great job of taking time to evaluate each of the cameras that they are going to be bringing to you before they actually make a decision on that.
All right, so if I'm not mistaken, council is supportive of finding a way financially to address the issues. So at this point, then what we will do is ask Tina to come forward and present the financial approach to this, and we'll go from there. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you for your time, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
Is that item D, Mayor? Or
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, D, discussion and direction related to funding public safety equipment needs. Yes. I don't think we had to take a vote on C, right? It was just,
Strong head nod.
well, no vote, but just comments. Good comments, good questions.
Good morning, Mayor, Council,
morning.
Mr. Valenzuela. Tina Deersky, Director of Finance. I have for you here some funding sources for what the body cameras that were just discussed, but I also wanted to make you aware of some other needs that are also public safety needs and initiatives. First of all, the body cameras, this is not the total amount that is required per the current quote that we have on file. That total amount is just over $1.6 million. So the
Say that slowly again, go back and restate that.
body cameras that were just discussed, the proposal or the quote that we currently have on file is over $1.6 million. We are proposing here to fund some of that through the regular budget process, and so the amount I have here is $250,000 less than that, proposing to fund $50,000 of it through the regular budget process per year for 5 years. Okay?
You have that broken down on another slide. So we
The
see
funding
that.
sources I'll have on another slide.
Okay.
And so the other proposal that we would propose for fire department would be an additional ambulance next year at the amount of $250,000 to fund the peak hours ambulance, as we have been in the past, at $263,000. And then we also have an additional needed funding for the Zetron system. The amount that we have set aside currently is about $200,000. We are finding, I'll let Bucky or Chief Dunn get up and talk if you have other questions about this, but they
Yes,
are
we need
finding
to know
that-
what Zetron is, or the
That's what I
public
was
needs to
saying.
know what it is.
Yes, ma'am. But in the meantime, I will say we have $200,000 currently set aside for that project. We are finding that it is going to exceed $600,000, so we've kind of just thrown everything else that we have available from the funding sources that I'll discuss in a moment towards this project, but I'll let them get up and discuss what the project is.
Good morning, Council. My name is Bucky Hasty. I'm the IT Director for the City of San Angelo. It's kind of a misnomer to call it Zetron. Zetron's actually a vendor, but it's kind of how we've come to know it, kind of like Band-Aid and stuff like that. What it actually is a fire station alerting system, and it allows dispatch, when a call comes in, to basically press a button and it sends an alert to a specific station. And I don't know the details of what goes on in the station. I've never actually witnessed it. We just support the system. But it tells lights and gives tones, and it turns on the radio so they can jump out of their bed and hear the call while they're getting ready to go to a call. So the actual term is fire station alerting system.
Okay. Daniel, you look.
Chief, I think Chief can kind of enlighten us a little bit more about what it does. So, Chief.
Yeah, so the station alerting system, as you said, there's one of those in each fire station. What it does is when dispatch receives a call, they'll go through there and they'll activate their screen. It opens up. I'm not sure if it goes through towers, airways, but it opens up so they'll receive the radio message telling them what they have. If it's after dark, the station will turn interior lights on. So if the guys are sleeping at the time at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, it will turn the lights on for them, set off tones. It will set off any visual aids for anybody hearing impaired or anything in our engine bays. So there's flashing lights in there. So if they happen to be deaf, that they can't see. So all this is attached to this system to alert the firefighters and the medics.
And so the additional, we have it in place already. We've got a system in place now.
The system that is in place now is 20-something years old, and when they went to the other CAD system, it no longer was supported. Right now, we are currently having serious issues with alerts going out. Sometimes they do not go to the stations, and they're having to be radioed out. So with the new CAD system being added, we were trying to get this new system in place, and I'm not sure when it goes. Going to finish. When's the new? I'm not sure when the new CAD systems.
And there's no grants available to help fund part of this?
I do not know of any grants to fund a alerting system.
Sandra, have we looked for anything in grant funding for this? And is our new fire station already equipped with this system, new system?
No, it does not have an alerting system in place right now. We were waiting to get this in. It's wired, but if you put the new system in, they need to all go in across all 8 stations. So we can't put one in there. We're waiting to see for the new system. We have the old one at the current station that we would move to temporarily do it, but that system does not work with the new CAD system.
Chief, this is an essential item. Basically, as you mentioned a while ago, as we're going to the new CAD RMS system, we need something that actually integrates and works well with that. So that's the issue at this point. As you mentioned a while ago, to get call-outs by radio, it's a very inefficient way of doing that. This would be the quickest way, quickest response, so it's something that really is essential to the fire department, correct?
It is. Alerting by radio, like I said, what will come through the airways for them, and it'll come through the entire speaker system in the station. So no matter if they're out checking out a truck or out on the grounds taking care of the lawn or whatever we happen to be doing, they will hear the message coming across. Otherwise, they would constantly have to carry a radio everywhere they go with them. Where this came to light was back in 2015 when the city went to the new CAD system, and this one is non-functional with that.
So for 4 years, it hasn't worked?
It's very spottily. That's what I'm telling you. It is. We are having issues where runs don't go through, and they have to call the station to say, "Hey, we're sending you out on a medical call or whatever." So,
does council have any further questions for this Zetron conversation? Lucy, you do?
Yes, Chief. On this total 392. Is that for all the stations you said?
yes, that's for all 8 stations.
Okay.
That's not the total amount, that's just additional funding, so the actual, yeah, correct. All right, so Tina, you want to come back up and continue?
Ma'am, so these are the needs that we have for public safety initiatives. On the next slide, I have some funding sources. I have actually gone and kind of scraped and scrubbed together some amounts that come up to the total that we're needing to fund. And so the first amount would come from the Spillman settlement proceeds in the amount of $1 million. That's currently sitting in the fund balance of one of the bond funds, and it can be only used for public safety equipment and initiatives.
So that would go towards body cams?
Yes, ma'am.
The police department?
Yes, ma'am. All of these funding sources combined will go to fund all of the combined needs, but yes, I would pair that together.
But just go through it and say who's benefiting from these, which request does this help fund?
Sure, okay. And then the public safety certificates of obligation funds, again, the bond funds have built up fund balance through interest revenue in the amount of almost $300,000. Again, that would be going to help fund the body cameras. The uncompensated care cost reimbursement, you just approved that charity care policy earlier in the meeting. That amount we expect to receive for the current year is about $576,000. They also had about $35,000 left from last year's reimbursement in the amount of about $610,000 to $612,000. And we would propose using that to fund the peak hours ambulance and also the fire station alerting system. And then we, of course, have the equipment replacement fund and the general capital project fund balances, is in addition to general fund interest revenue surplus. Those three amounts combined would then shore up to fund the additional ambulance as well as the remainder of the body cameras.
All right, so the funding sources equal to $2,321,901, which is equal to the funding request of $2,003,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Amazing how
Again,
those numbers match.
Again, I did.
Brings how that works, isn't it?
I'd like you to balance my checking account.
Yeah, I can actually.
That was sheer coincidence, Mayor. I'm telling you right now. So.
No, I did actually, the amount for the fire station alerting system, we just kind of put everything that we had left there because we actually believe we're going to need even more than that, and so we're just trying to fund as much as we can
Okay.
through these one-time funding sources.
Do I have questions from council? Harry?
Do we need a motion?
Let me just see if there's any further questions, and then I'll let you make the motion, Harry. Any further questions from council? There are none, so Harry, would you go ahead and make a motion?
I have some more information.
Oh, well, then
Before you
don't
make your
do it
motion,
yet.
I would like to say one other thing. I did mention that $250,000 spread over 5 years, so $50,000 a year, would need to be included in our proposed budget that we're going to adopt later in the meeting. We propose that $50,000 come from what they are currently budgeting, which is about $25,000 a year for tasers, the remainder coming from the riverbank stabilization. We did kind of increase that as needed, and so we would propose a joint of those to fund the $50,000 per year. So we would ask for that amendment when we propose the budget later in the meeting.
Let me just ask a question as it relates to body cams, tasers, and car cams. In this proposal, is that purchasing all that is requested, or is it something that we're looking at doing over a series of years? And I only ask this for the following reasons. With everything that we ever buy, there's always updates and new equipment, new ideas, new concepts. And so the question mark is this something that we need to do over 2 years or 3 years? Is it something that allows us to constantly be getting the best equipment, the newest equipment, instead of buying it all at once and getting what's available today? Frank, Tracy, are you still here? I don't want to disqualify the need. I just want to know, are we better off over a period of 2 or 3 years replacing, or does that create complications? Daniel,
It's
you
my
want to speak to
understanding,
that?
yes, Mayor, it's my understanding that you would have to have 2 different systems running concurrently. So you would have the new system plus the old antiquated system. So there would be costs associated with that. So the efficiencies we talked about a while ago wouldn't be had. So that's why they're proposing actually taking a look at all of it right now.
Okay. That answers my question. And, okay, so
We're just looking for direction here.
Okay.
So, Harry, you don't even need to make a motion, but
Certainly.
I guess,
make
right?
a motion that we.
No, you don't
Oh, we
need
don't?
to, she
We just
said.
need direction.
We're just telling her that we like the proposals and the funding
So that's
sources.
one other thing I wanted to mention, Mayor. Thank you for bringing that up. I would bring this back then if I receive direction to do so at the September 17th meeting and ask for formal action to carry these amounts over into the next fiscal year so that they are available for funding.
All right, is there no reason for us not to do that today?
I wanted to
I mean,
get,
if we're
I wanted
gonna
to get
do
your
it.
consensus and direction before I assumed that you would take that action. So we haven't put it on as an action item for today's agenda.
But just because you haven't put it on as action, can we take action and move on? No, we can't. Our hands are tied.
Mayor, in that same item in the next meeting, I was planning to bring back the sales tax surplus and discuss carrying that over for streets. So I think it will be an agenda item
Okay.
on the 17th.
Then we'll move on.
Okay.
And what we are going to do is take a break,
Oh.
a much-needed break. And so I always say one number, and then it's a different number when we call it back to order. So it's 10:48. I'm going to say we'll be back at 11:10. Does that give everybody?
22 minutes?
20 minutes. 20 minutes. Is that enough, everybody? Yeah. What we are going to do is call the meeting back to order at 11:07, and we're going to quickly do item E, which Bob has said takes less than 5 minutes, because we want to honor our citizens who so patiently sat through all of our questions and presentations. Bob. Oh, consider approving a financial incentive program to promote infill development in neighborhoods targeted for revitalization.
Good morning again. Following council's direction, we contacted several developers to get their input on a possible incentive program for infill development. They did express some concerns. One was for the current requirements levied by the city that are burdensome and very costly. John is in the process of getting those requirements reviewed and possibly changed. And he'll come back to you at a later date to discuss those changes.
But we need that soon. So I need a deadline put to that.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Another concern is the cost of extending infrastructure to lots that don't have water and sewer. Of course, lots that don't have infrastructure are not considered true infill, but instead they're considered expansion. Staff is recommending an incentive program that will provide $5,000 for any infill development in the neighborhoods targeted for revitalization, to be used at the discretion of the developers. We'll start up with a fund of $200,000. That'll be general funds. Prospective projects would need to contact my office before beginning construction, with payment coming at the end of completion. It would be first come, first served, with no caps on the number of units. The program really can be considered a investment in neighborhood revitalization with a return of investment within 5 to 10 years, depending on the sale of the home and the tax valuation. And we need a couple of things from you today. We need to decide if you want to include lots that don't have water and sewer as eligible properties, number one. Number two, of course, we'll need approval for the program.
All right, so number one, that's part of, some of the areas that are in the revitalization neighborhoods don't have water and sewer. I mean, that's
correct.
the biggest expense. But that $5,000 could go towards the infrastructure of water and sewer, right? Because you're saying it's $5,000 per house.
Per unit. So if you're going to build 6 houses, you have to extend the sewer line for 6 houses. That's $30,000 that you would
That
get.
truly is the largest expense, water and sewer.
Yes, it is, and that would help cover some of that extra cost associated with expanding that infrastructure.
Okay. Do I have questions for Bob from council? No, I don't see anybody. Okay, so you need a motion.
We do, approval of the program.
Harry, you want to do that, or Lucy or Tom, because they're primarily in your district, so I'd like one of you to do that.
So moved as presented.
Second.
Second, all right. Any public comment?
Mayor, I do
Yes,
have
sir.
a question. What I heard was support for allowing this to be used where water and sewer, on lots where there was not water and sewer?
Correct.
Inclusive.
Inclusive.
Yeah,
Inclusive.
other issues, but
Inclusive,
it
yes.
could still be for water and sewer where there is none.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Can we clarify?
Hold on,
one
wait a minute,
thing?
Lane.
Steve Hampton, it was not clearly made to me where this $200,000 is coming from.
Tina will be covering that. You want to do it now?
Yes, ma'am. We'll cover that when we go through the presentation of the budget ordinance.
All right. Lane, did you have a question or comment?
When you said that example where you had about 6 lots, would that be $5,000 per lot or $5,000?
That is correct. So,
Okay.
and it would run about $50,000 to extend it. So that gives you a good chunk of money to help
Right.
cover that extra
Okay.
cost.
All right. So there is a motion and a second, and we've had public comment. We will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, golly. Kathy's got to stop.
The magic happens?
I'm like, I'd like it to be magic, but the motion is what we're talking about. So that passes 7-0. I'm going to have to give it up. for a
Harry can
moment
take
here.
over, Mayor, if you need him to.
Oh, I'm like, what is going on? Okay, so we are going to now go into F, which is discussion and consideration of matters related to fiscal year 2019-2020 operating budget, including 1, a first public hearing and introduction of an ordinance of the City of San Angelo approving and adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019 and ending September 30th, 2020. This budget will raise more total property tax dollars than last year's budget by $1,365,635, or 3.58%. And of that amount, $405,140 is tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll. And 2, conduct a separate record vote to ratify the property tax revenue increase reflected in the budget and place the adoption of this tax rate on the agenda for the September 17th, 2019 regular meeting of the City Council as an action item. And what Julia has told me that we will need to do is to take 2 votes. And by that, do you mean a vote on item 1 and a vote on item 2 separately?
Yes, we'll have
Okay.
2 separate motions, and the second one will be a record vote where everyone states their name and then for or against the motion.
Okay. All right, with that, Tina?
Yes, ma'am. Again, we'll first go through the budget ordinance, and the proposed budget that we discussed at the general fund workshop is being brought back to you for this meeting for the first public hearing. And then we'll have, of course, the record vote to ratify the property tax. So we included in the budget ordinance that we're proposing the amount of $200,000 for infill development, an amount of just over $300,000 for river stabilization, $97,000 for development services software, about $880,000 for salary adjustments at that 2% level, and then, of course, the decrease of about $200,000 for health insurance.
Let me just, if I could at this moment, ask Rick a question. When we were discussing the riverbank stabilization program, we had obviously been presented by Altours the $200,000 issue that was 2 locations that I think all council members had an opportunity to review, and we were all like, oh my gosh, get it done. But you mentioned that you had over $800,000 identified as riverbank issues. So obviously not now, but I just want to make sure we have a plan going forward to understand what is of immediate crisis other than those 2 spots, and maybe some ways, Tina, that we might find funding to do that, because you brought that up at the last meeting, and I don't want to ignore your comments that you made.
And over time, we'll need to look at just stabilizing the banks all the way across, as we did with the river project through the downtown area. And so what we did was identify those immediate needs where there are areas that the riverbank is deteriorated so bad it's fixing to damage sidewalks or so forth. So we addressed a couple. We have 2 more at bid right now. We've identified, as I said, all the way from where we stopped the bank stabilization by Oaks Street all the way back down to the sports complex, looking at that section and have identified, several of those, and then those are prioritized. So what we would do with those dollars is start with the worst ones, addressing them first. If grant dollars are available, like through the TCEQ that we applied last year, we try to leverage those dollars with additional funding where we can find those grant opportunities.
I just want to make sure we keep our eyes on it and not let it get to the point these are, and so.
Every year sort of thing
Yeah.
that we're going to need to keep addressing over the years to come.
Okay, go ahead, Tina.
Yes, ma'am. And then I just want to remind you again that we will be including that roughly $25,000 annually for the body cameras. So just to remind you, I want that to be a part of this discussion and the approval. Okay? So I just want to go through what the budget ordinance does. It includes the following provisions. It authorizes employee compensation schedules, provides for the general appropriation of funds, reserves unto the City Council the authority to transfer appropriations budgeted, ratifying transfers of appropriations occurring in the FY20 and amending the budget accordingly. And it provides for lapse of all unencumbered or unobligated funds for the prior fiscal year and for carryovers of appropriations of encumbered, obligated, or restricted funds.
Okay, so Teresa, that sounds very legalish.
It is.
Yes. Did you have a question
That
about it?
final
No, I
bullet.
just wanted to make sure it sounds
It's
very
part of
legal there,
Yes,
that
it's
statement.
good.
So I just need to know if there's any issues that need to be pointed out relative to that line.
Oh, no, review all of this prior to even presenting it to you, so it's all fine, yes.
Okay.
It also reserves under the city council the power, only is permitted by law, to amend or make changes to the budget. It provides authority for the city manager or his designee to make certain adjustments from time to time within the budget. It authorizes the city manager or his designee to apply for and accept certain grants and execute any related documents, and it provides for the filing of the budget.
And city manager, are you okay with all of that?
Yes, ma'am, I have been, and it's really no change, so no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, these are all things that you've approved in the past as a council, and we just like to bring it to your attention since it is part of the ordinance.
Okay, so do I have questions, comments, input on anything that Tina has brought forward on this? Tom, you look like you're studying something.
Last year, after we approved the budget, we had several amendments where we carried carryover, and we were always, had the carryover lecture. Can we do something to expedite that process, or are we just gonna have to deal with it when it comes?
Well, she's going to present that on the September 17th meeting. And the difference is, compared to past year, was that we had already made a general statement that we would support the additional sales tax revenue going to streets. I don't know that we have, and they'll maybe will tell us then if we have to get more specific about what we mean with that, or is it a
I was just trying to
specific?
expedite the process
Yeah.
after that.
So any funds that are already encumbered, obligated, or restricted in the current year will be automatically carried over. Anything that is by department request to carry over funds into the next fiscal year, that would come back to you in November or December. And like I said, at the September 17th meeting, I will come back and ask you for specific direction so that I can automatically carry over the sales tax surplus for streets or whatever you decide, as well as the funding for public safety.
Okay.
So that should make that process a little smoother.
Okay, any further questions or comments? All right, move forward.
So this is the end of the budget portion, so up to you if you want to go ahead and take the vote on this portion and then move to the next section, or we can do it all in.
I want to make sure, is this an appropriate time to allow for some public comment? I don't have a motion on the floor, but I don't want.
The tax rate is the next item. I don't know which item.
It's addressing the tax rate, Mayor. So.
Okay, so go ahead.
She's good, he's good.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I guess if we're going to take a vote on the budget ordinance to be adopted as presented with those adjustments for the public safety.
Okay, and is, on this one, do I need each individual person on F1?
This is a regular motion.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
So moved.
Billy made a motion and Lane seconded it. And so do I have any public comment on this portion relating to the 2019-2020 budget? Yes, sir. Thank you for your patience with us today.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. My only question is, I see a software that came up here. Are you and the county involved in the same process? Because this issue came up with the county commissioners.
There are different issues. This one is specific to our planning department. They have a software package that allows for developers to go online and fill out the information, which saves them a trip to the planning department, and so they can apply for these permits online. That software is outdated, and this is an update to that existing software to keep it current. And the county doesn't have the same planning permits department that we have, or the same software, so we have different rules and regulations, so they're totally separate.
Well, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. But my question being, and my name is Don Chavez, by the way. I'm sorry I overlooked that piece of it. But what I'm saying is, could there be one developer that gives consensus to both parties? Because that meeting that I came from last month, the Purdue was the dominant software producer. And there was a lot of animosity, I think, between different departments because it doesn't cover their agenda, what they need. So all I'm asking is possibly could this be introduced to one vendor that they could work both issues?
The
Or
county, the county government operates totally separate from the city government, and I'll let Teresa address that as a,
There are ways where counties and cities can work together through interlocal agreements on purchasing issues, and that's one thing that we are exploring through our purchasing department right now. But as of today, we don't have those kind of relationships built with the county, so they are separate purchases.
We're going to possibly.
Well, I don't
look
know
at-
about this particular contract you're talking about, but in general, there's ongoing discussions about how we can all work together to get, one, better pricing because we're buying more things.
That's
But
just
there
it
are
is.
mechanisms in the law. We are evaluating those, but we don't have that in place now.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
all right, with that, any additional public comment? With not, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, that F1 passes 7-0. Now we will go to F2, conduct a separate record vote to ratify the property tax revenue increase reflected in the budget and place the adoption of this tax rate on the agenda for the September 17th, 2019 regular meeting of the City Council as an action item.
Thank you, Mayor. That was a lot of words to basically say we need a record vote to ratify the tax revenue increase, not a tax rate increase. There's an increase in tax revenue because of an increase in assessed valuations, which is unrelated and separate from the tax rate.
What we want to make very clear to the public today is that the city council has no authority over the appraisal process of Tom Green County. The only thing we have the authority over is the rate. And so for those citizens who are upset that they're going to pay more dollars this year in property tax, that's not because of our rate. Our rate will maintain the same if we all vote accordingly. But Tom Green County Appraisal District evaluates the valuations of the properties, just to be very clear.
Yes, ma'am.
The
Thank
city
you.
does not have a hand in that process. Okay.
Okay, so at this point, I need you to conduct a separate record vote.
Do we take public comment before we do the vote? Mr. Chavez, would you like to come comment on the tax rate?
Yes, ma'am. When I was at the meeting on the 27th of last month, one of the things that caught my eye, and then we were talking about, let me go back to the second page of this, was there going to be $1,200,915 property tax increase in 2020, and you just commented at the fact of you don't propose it and you have no control over it, but the tax district is the one
That's
that we got to
correct.
talk to. And also the other thing that caught my attention then is we have a large turnover in employees, whether it be in the police department, fire department, or people that do the potholes, that kind of stuff. In that turnover, it was stated that there was money that we were losing because of that turnover. What I'm asking is, could that money that we're losing, and I don't know if it's out in the air that we can grab, be used to increase the salary so we don't have that big turnover? Because in training, retraining, that kind of stuff.
Those are whole separate issues, and we deal with the human resource issues relative to salaries increases on that subject. This subject has nothing to do with salaries and maintaining employees, so we really can't talk to that at this moment. But we do, Daniel.
Yeah, Mayor, and it's a good question, Mr. Chavez. I know earlier the question that you're talking about economies of scale, great. You're right on the right trail as well. So, but on our end, we do address that through human resources. We do understand that we have certain needs. For some reason, there's certain positions we just cannot hire, and keep in those positions. So we are looking at different ways, different options to actually make that happen. So
yeah, that was my concern.
Well, the reality today, Mr. Chavez, is that we are in an economy where our unemployment rate is 3% or less, and so it's really an employee's world that they live in right now. The fact that we're a city, what we do is very public, but I assure you that all companies, all corporations, all businesses in the city of San Angelo are having turnovers because of the impact of the oil and gas industry.
Yes, ma'am.
And so we all are suffering from that. I know many people who've lost people, even in the restaurant industry, to the oil fields. It happens across the board. It is low unemployment, and those that aren't employed usually are considered unemployable at this point when you have that kind of low interest rate. But we are low unemployment,
Right.
but we value the employees and we work to secure them.
Keep them. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, with that, we will take a record vote. I'm going to start with Tommy.
Need a motion first.
Oh, well, then I'm going to start with Tommy Hebert making a motion.
I'll make, so what do we need to make the motion to do, Julia?
You'll need to read
the screen.
I just need to say my name and read that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I, Tommy Hebert, ratify the property tax revenue increase reflected in the budget and place the adoption of this tax on the agenda for the September 17th, 2019 regular meeting of the City Council as an action item.
Tom?
I, Tom Thompson, SMD2.
You can just second it. You can just second it.
Perfect.
Okay. There you
Tom's got
go.
it.
Now we take a record vote, so each person will say their name and their district and say yes or no. Correct. Okay, Billy?
Billy DeWitt, District 6, yes.
Lane Carter, District 5, yes.
Lucy Gonzalez, District 4, yes.
Brenda Gunter, Mayor, yes.
Harry Thomas, District 3, yes.
Tom Thompson, District 2, yes.
Tommy Hebert, single member District 1, yes.
Complete? Okay. We will now move into item G, and again, we'll need to do a record vote on this as well. So this is a second public hearing and introduction of an ordinance levying property taxes for the city of San Angelo for the 2019 tax year. Public hearing and first reading of an ordinance fixing and leveling ad valorem taxes for the current tax year for use and support of the municipal government of the city of San Angelo, Texas for the 2019-2020 budget year, providing for the assessment and collection thereof, providing when the tax shall become due, providing when the tax shall become delinquent, providing for exemptions, providing for severability, providing for publication on the city-operated website, and providing for an effective date. Tina, you're on again.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, second public hearing and introduction of the actual ordinance levying the property taxes for the 2019 tax year. The proposed rate is at .776 per $100 valuation, and that breaks out to be .6824 cents designated for maintenance and operations, and then the .0936 that's designated for debt service.
All right, so with this, do we have any public comment before we take a vote? All right, so Harry, would you like to make a motion?
I move that we assess .776 as proposed property tax rate for fiscal year 20.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A second by Lane. Now, I gave you a couple minutes to think about public comment. Is there any now? With none, we will take a vote. We'll start with Tommy.
I vote aye.
You want to say your name and your district?
Tommy Hebert, single member District 1, I vote yes.
Tom Thompson, single member District 2, I vote yes.
Harry Thomas, single member District 3, I vote yes.
Brenda Gunter, Mayor, I vote yes.
Lucy Gonzalez, District 4, I vote yes.
Lane Carter, District 5, yes.
Billy DeWitt, District 6, yes.
All right. We will move into the closed session. Executive session under the provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, Exceptions to Requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.071, 1A, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney about pending or contemplated litigation regarding Levi Shapiro versus City of San Angelo, Christopher Harrington, Tanner Tomlinson, Abraham Flores, Chase Hill, and Zach Villarreal, individually and in their official capacities as police officers for San Angelo Police Department, and B, Section 551.072 to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person regarding the water utility property in the area of Hillside Drive and Gun Club Road. It is currently 11:32. We will be back at 12:30.
Yeah, I think that'll be fine. No, actually, I'd say 45 minutes at the most. Yeah.
Somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour, we'll be back.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor.
9 p.m. And there was no announcements to be made from our closed session, so we will go to 9, follow-up and administrative issues. Consider items discussed in closed session. As I said, there are none. Announcements and consideration for future agenda items. Are there any? I see no, so there are none. And then I just need a motion for adjournment.
Move we adjourn.
And there's a motion and a second and a vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're done.